both Twitch and YouTube. As I said, hopefully we are live on YouTube because every time I try to stream on fucking YouTube, they want to give me the wrong date and time. I don't know what's going on with that, but YouTube, you need to get your shit together. You need to honestly get your shit together. So hopefully you guys are watching it live as well on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. Tonight, we will be streaming Season 4, 2019 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. That is correct. We have finally made it all the way to Season 4. Now, I just want to make a couple announcements before we get started with the episode. Let's switch over to the live feed on Twitch so people aren't confused and people can actually see what's going on here. We'll try to get that going. It looks like it just automatically transitions now too. I don't know. Let me go in studio mode and see. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. They had a whole update here on Streamlabs as well, because Streamlabs is apparently the equivalent of Apple, where you got to fucking update the thing every single week. But it looks like it transitioned automatically. I did it again just to be a little more extra positive on that. Looks like a little bit of a lag as well too, but that is to be expected on Streamlabs. YouTube looks fine. Okay, so as I said, ladies and gentlemen, today's date, August 8th, 2024. Currently 9:53 p.m., almost 10 p.m. here in Buffalo, New York. But we are watching Season 4, 2019 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. Tonight's episodes include Chud, CHUD, and Castle Freak. So it's a little interesting to me as well how a lot of the episodes in this season kind of cover what we were going to do for our 4th of July marathon not too long ago. Long time no stream, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see everybody back. Good to see everybody checking out the stream once again. So a couple announcements before we get started. The first being congratulations to Optic Gaming, who have just recently won the Call of Duty World Championship for Modern Warfare 3. They defeated the New York Subliners, a team also not too far away from me. But congratulations to Optic Gaming. You know I love Optic. Just nothing but support for those guys. We also have a #1 album right now in the country. That is America. From the man himself, Slim Shady, Eminem. You see his poster back there all the time. Gotta show my support and my regards to the rap god himself. We got the #1 album from Eminem. We got Optic Gaming as world champions in Modern Warfare 3. What a fucking time to be alive, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not the original Modern Warfare 3, okay? That is the bullshit-ass remakes that they've been doing for the past couple years now. I was always a supporter of the original Modern Warfare series. Story absolutely phenomenal. The way they tied everything together, the remakes can't even fucking touch it. But that's not what we're going to talk about right now. What we're going to talk about is after we do Season 4 of The Last Drive-In here with Joe Bob. They're going to kind of bounce around a bit, but that is intentionally being done because we have a lot of holidays coming up, such as Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, right around the corner from us now. Also, your boy's birthday right around the corner in October. So, after this season, I believe we are going to do Season 5 in September. This season will have about 17 episodes, so we will cover all 17 episodes of Season 4 of The Last Drive-In. And then once we make it to September, we will start to do Season 5, which has about 19 episodes, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. Also, another announcement, we got the Bills season starting, all right? The Buffalo Bills, shout out to the Bills Mafia. Our first game going to be this Saturday, 1 p.m. We're playing the Chicago Bears, the Bears. We're going to be playing Chicago on the preseason opener. So hopefully a good season for all the Buffalo Bills and Bills Mafia fans as well. I wanted to buy tickets this year. I honestly wanted to buy tickets and do like a little family gathering with, you know, me and my family. We were going to get 4 tickets. We were going to go November when they were going to play the Chiefs at home in Orchard Park in Buffalo. We were going to see it, but they fucked us with the price. The price started to get a little hectic once I went to the checkout. They were talking about $1,400 for 4 tickets, which to me is completely out of my budget. Cannot afford that, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, Buffalo Bills, Terry Pagula, you gotta fucking make your tickets cheaper, okay? Even for like other games, even for games that it's not the Chiefs versus the Bills, they still were talking about like $800, and that's for the cheapest tickets. Okay, that's like all the way up in the 300s, like the nosebleed shit. Like, and they're still talking about like $800. You gotta fucking pay for that new stadium somehow, some way, Buffalo, New York. Am I right? But again, that is completely out of my budget. And then people are going to say, well, why don't you go see a Buffalo Sabres game, Dwayne? Well, because it's the same shit. Even for the cheapest tickets, they want about $500, $600 for 4. Again, because I'm trying to do like a family gathering kind of thing. But for 4 tickets, that's running you about $400, $500. And I am not going to pay $400, $500 to watch the fucking Sabres get fucking dismantled and destroyed by an away team. I mean, these motherfuckers can't even make it to the playoffs. I could see if they were at least like a playoff contender, but these motherfuckers can't even make it to the playoffs, so that's definitely not happening. I'm thinking more like a Buffalo Bandits game. When the Bandits season comes around, maybe, we'll be able to do a little Bandits game. Right now, we're kind of in jeopardy with our financial situation. As I said before, ladies and gentlemen, we had a whole dryer die on us this year, had to replace the dryer. Thankfully, we did that. We can finally do laundry. We've been, we've had it for a couple months now, probably since like March, but that died earlier in the year. And also, we are still trying to replace the oven. So we still have an oven that is a no-go for us. Yesterday, when I went to the Erie County Fair, that was like the first time I actually got to enjoy some fucking real quality food, because I've been living on nothing but fucking microwavable shit and all this other bullshit, and I fucking hate microwavable food. I hate microwaves with a passion. I feel like Gordon Ramsay sometimes talking about it, but it's the truth. Yesterday was probably the first time I actually had to have a decent, like, quality meal for the first time. So I believe that covers all of our announcements. Oh, one more thing. We officially have a new world heavyweight champion in the WWE, Gunther, the Ring General. Shout out to Gunther. I always knew you could do it, buddy. If any of you have ever watched my WWE Universe mode series where I play 2K and I do my little universe mode, you can see how many countless times I've supported Gunther in the past. So I always knew he had the potential to be a future champion here in the WWE. And now I believe that covers everything that I wanted to discuss here on the opening segment. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we are going to get into our last drive-in episodes now with Joe Bob Briggs. Episode 1 and 2 in Season 4, 2019 of The Last Drive-In. And I'll let the man, the myth, the legend himself take it away.
Joe Bob Briggs is
A little bit of a throwback here, July 25th, 1985. You can see Joe Bob here opening at some kind of venue. Not really sure where the venue is located right now, but he is doing a live show. And before we get started as well, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to say I'm sipping on a little bit of Arnold Palmer. My man, the half and half, the lemonade and the iced tea, one of my absolute favorites. Little low right now on the half and half lemonade and iced tea, Arnold Palmer. So probably around episode 2, I might get myself another drink here. But that is what we are sipping on, ladies and gentlemen. The Arnold Palmer half and half lemonade and iced tea. That is the drink of choice for tonight.
I don't know if this is a drive-in crowd or not. So I tell you what, to find out, I'm going to swear in this crowd. I want you to all rise for the drive-in oath.
All rise for the drive-in oath.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. We are drive-in mutants.
We are drive-in mutants.
We are not like other people.
We are not like other people.
We are sick.
We are sick.
We are disgusting.
We are disgusting.
We believe in blood.
We believe in blood.
In breasts.
In breasts.
And in beasts.
And in beasts.
If life had a vomit meter.
If life had a vomit meter.
We'd be off the scale.
We'd be off the scale.
As long as one drive-in remains.
As long as one drive-in remains.
On the planet Earth.
On the planet Earth.
We will party like jungle animals.
We will party like jungle animals.
We will boogie till we puke.
We will boogie till we puke.
The drive-in will never die.
The drive-in will never die.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so do just want to mute the music just in case YouTube decides to fuck us with the copyright restrictions once again. But once it gets started, we will unmute it and we will be back to the regular scheduled episode here for this evening. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is season 4 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob. We're watching episodes 1 and 2 tonight. Joe Bob is going to be talking about Chud, the first Chud, and then also Castle Freak following right after. So getting season 4 started with a bang here. As I said, these were also some episodes that would have been covered and watched in our 4th of July movie marathon. Couldn't do that because, once again, YouTube likes to fuck us with copyright restrictions. But maybe one day we will get to watch full-length movies in their full glory here on YouTube. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Bob to take it away.
Let's talk about shower scenes. Oh, I'm Joe Bob Briggs. This is the first week of The Last Drive-In on Shudder. And they wanted me to do an 80s movie, of course, so I'm doing an 80s movie. They say it's a beloved 80s movie, CHUD, C-H-U-D, which stands for Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. At least half the people watching this show already know what it stands for because it's an often requested movie. And to tell you the truth, I don't really understand why it's an often requested movie. But before we get to that, I do want to mention I think there's about like 4 or 5 Chud movies in total. I know they have quite a few of them. I remember watching a couple of the Chud movies way back when I had a little horror channel of my own when I used to do like DirecTV and shit. They had a channel specifically catered and tailored for horror movies exclusively. And that is pretty much where I got to see a lot more of like the campy stuff, a lot more of like the B-movie stuff, which is absolutely my favorites, as you guys know. But I do remember at least watching 3 or 4 Chud movies in total back then.
I wanted to talk about how this movie used to have a naked shower scene in it. And in the version we're showing, there's a shower scene, but no nakedity. We're showing the PG-rated version of the scene, which...
They have to show the PG-rated version, ladies and gentlemen, so you know if they're not showing any breasts, that's going to take away from the fucking star total. That's definitely going to lose a rating here from Joe Bob. You can't show PG-rated movies when we're talking about horror. What the fuck is a PG-rated movie when it comes to horror?
Is occurring more and more these days, and so let's take a look at maybe why that's happening. Every exploitation movie from about 1970 to 1995 had a shower scene, or the equivalent of a shower scene. And that tradition emanates from 2 movies, Psycho, because Janet Leigh was killed in the shower, and Carrie, because Sissy Spacek was humiliated in the shower. So if you want to show vulnerability of either kind, physical vulnerability or emotional vulnerability, you put the girl in the shower. Okay, so combine this with a principle that was first explained to me by the great producer Roger Corman. He would say, Joe Bob, the addition of breast nudity to a film has been shown to improve its box office prospects. The ideal number of scenes is 4. The lead actress should appear nude from the waist up in 2 of the scenes, one near the beginning of the movie and one near the end. Then you should have 2 supporting actresses who are nude in 1 scene each. If these scenes are skillfully placed, the male viewer will believe he has seen a lot more than he has actually seen and will be satisfied. If you've seen many Roger Corman movies, then you'll notice that this principle is successfully applied in most cases, including one spectacular sequence in which Maria Ford demonstrates kung fu in the nude. What movie was that? I don't even remember the movie. I think it was a naked kung fu sequence. And I think it was Angel of Destruction, because Charlie Spradling didn't want to do the naked kung fu. And so Roger Corman flew Maria Ford to the Philippines to take over that role. And actually, I think they just did a rewrite, and they killed off Charlie Spradling so they could keep the initial footage they had shot. And they had Maria play her sister, who flies to the Philippines to find out who killed her. And the answer as to who killed her is Roger Corman killed her, because she wouldn't do the nude scene. So the plot would have suffered, obviously, without the nude kung fu. So that's what I mean when I say it doesn't have to be a shower scene. It can be the equivalent of a shower scene. But why is the shower scene associated with the horror film, and particularly with the slasher film? Vulnerability. Historically male audience. And the third reason is it can wake up the audience in the middle part of the movie where it's starting to drag. So that's what they were doing in Chud. But Kim Greist, the model who was playing the female lead, didn't want to do the scene, and so they used a body double. So the subsequent censorship of the scene is even more idiotic, because it means it's not even protecting the girl who didn't want to get naked, it's protecting the uncredited girl who doubled for the girl who didn't want to get naked. But either way, it's a disturbing trend in modern cinema, the elimination of the shower scene from horror. Do you guys know who Tiffany Shepis is? She's been in 13,000 horror films. I saw her recently, and she claims that she did the last authentic shower scene in about 2004. She told me the movie, but I forgot the name of the movie. Anyway, we got to have her on just for the historical value of describing the last shower scene, right? Okay. And by the way, the movies that have a lot of male shower scenes, like the films of director Dave Dakota, or films like Sleepaway Camp that fetishize the male camp counselors in their booty shorts and their shirtless glamour shots. In my opinion, those don't achieve the same result as female shower scenes, because you don't feel like those guys are that vulnerable unless it's a shower scene in a prison, okay? But even in those cases, the women in cages movies like Chained Heat, they always have group shower scenes in those. The naked women seem like they're in more danger when you have a row of naked men in a male prison. I don't know why that is. Anyway, my point is, shower scenes were not invented by low-budget exploitation directors. They were invented by Hitchcock and De Palma. It was just the low-budget exploitation guys who perfected the shower scene, and that's why I have always said I would do an automatic 1/2 star deduction from any horror film that doesn't have a breast count. But now I'm revising that slightly, because in movies made after 2004, the shower scene virtually appears, and it's replaced by, on the one hand, ridiculous amounts of breastage. I mean, like those Japanese and Korean movies where they have random naked women showing up every 5 seconds. Or movies that go out of their way to do fig leaf shots where the woman is always covered up by gauzy lenses or potted plants that get in the way of what you can see. In other words, we live in a degenerate, enfeebled era of drive-in history, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing The Last Drive-In. We intend to promote the old school eternal verities of drive-in filmmaking, and to call out by name those who would lead us into a dark era of cinema al fresco, in which the shower scene, to use just one egregious example, is considered obsolete. I am here to be your drive-in justice warrior. All right, everybody knows the first definition of Chud: cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. But how well do you remember the plot of this movie? Because it really stands for something else. The movie was filmed on location in New York City, and some of the tunnel scenes were shot under the Brooklyn Bridge on
New York City, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out New York, making the Chud movies.
the Manhattan side. And John Caglione, who worked on The Exorcist and Amityville Horror, he created the creatures, but he was given such a short time to work on the creatures that he could only do a head and arms, which is why you never see a full chud in the movie. Originally, they weren't even going to have monsters. They were just going to have cannibals. And so John was this last-minute hire, but we go into all this later, so, as we try to figure out why so many people love this movie.
Now, some of you may know this, maybe not a lot of you know this, but besides the slasher genre, one of my favorite genres of horror is cannibalism. All right, I really love stuff about cannibals and cannibalism films. And this is way beyond going past like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, we're talking about like actual cannibal films like Cannibal Holocaust, The Green Inferno by Eli Roth. Again, one of my favorite horror directors right now. Eli Roth does amazing work. Even his most recent movie, Thanksgiving, kind of had some cannibalism sequences in there. So, other than slasher films, I really love stuff about cannibals. And this movie didn't really strike me that much of a cannibal movie back then, but it technically is supposed to be considered one of those. I guess back in the 80s, a lot of this stuff was kind of rare, and it was almost looked down upon when you had like things that kind of didn't cooperate with the regular horror movies that were more mainstream, or the stuff that was actually popular, around Hollywood and stuff. So I think a lot of the movie tries to stray away from like that cannibalism idea, but it is supposed to be considered a cannibal film.
But the background on this is the 1980s was the toxic waste decade in movies. And of course, the most famous toxic waste movie was probably The Toxic Avenger, the pinnacle of Troma Studios history. But the toxic waste themes were all inspired by one event in American history. Does anybody know what that one event? Love Canal. That was the neighborhood in Niagara Falls, New York, where people found out they were living in a subdivision built on top of 21,000 tons of toxic waste that were deposited there by the aptly named Hooker Chemical Corporation.
Shout out to Niagara Falls, New York, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Niagara Falls, just up the street from me here in Buffalo, New York. I've heard a lot of times before people actually think that Niagara Falls is like our shining moment, like it's the only thing to come to Buffalo, New York to see is Niagara Falls. But the interesting thing about that to me is Niagara Falls is between Canada and New York, Buffalo. So it's not necessarily like strictly Buffalo to me, because it also incorporates a lot of Canada. It's almost like the Peace Bridge, right? You travel along the bridge to make it to Canada, to Toronto, Ontario, or vice versa. You want to leave Toronto, Ontario to come visit Buffalo, New York. But for me, Niagara Falls has never really represented Buffalo to its full glory, its full potential. I think it's kind of funny when people think the only thing that we're famous for is Niagara Falls and chicken wings. But I have even heard rumors before that the Buffalo Bills should play in Niagara Falls, that they should have a stadium in Niagara Falls. Don't know how supportive people would be of that. I've also heard rumors that they wanted to move the Buffalo Bills at one point to Toronto, Canada. And again, you would just kill the entire fan base here, because not a lot of people from Buffalo, New York are going to be traveling over the Peace Bridge to Toronto, Canada to watch a Buffalo Bills football game. Which, I mean, they would be technically the first NFL team in Canada to have an audience and a sports team there for American football. But yeah, you keep the Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park. All right, you don't give them a dome, because we love our fucking snow games. We love our blizzard games. That's another thing they got to fucking try to calm down with too. Whenever it's snowing here in Buffalo, they want to make a big fucking deal about it, like it's the worst fucking blizzard of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, I played hockey in fucking snow deeper than some of these blizzards. Okay, it is not that bad. If I can get out there and I can shovel, you can get out there and you can play a fucking football game, Buffalo Bills.
So a hooker who messes with your love canal. I mean, we've all been there, right? Anyway, health problems ensued. So one of the lesser known results of the love canal disaster was a spate of B movies in the 80s, of which this is one of the most beloved. And so what we have here is a sensitive look into the plight of the urban homeless and what happens when a shady corporation stores a bunch of leaky, toxic waste barrels in the tunnels and sewers under New York City, turning the street people into slime glopola monsters who run around eating other citizens of the Big Apple, and eventually a police captain's wife and her little dog. So the police captain teams up with the bum that runs the soup kitchen, and they figure out something fishy's going on, and they confront the guy who says he's with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but is actually with the shady corporation, and then everybody wanders around in the sewers until the slime glopola chuds eat more people, and the shady guy finally confesses that it doesn't stand for cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. It stands for, I'm not going to tell you, because I'm not going to do any spoilers, because it's time for slime glopola chud heads to roll. We've got 8 dead bodies, 2 gallons of blood, 1 dead dog, 2 breasts, which you will not be seeing.
2 breasts which are not shown in this version of Chud. So the -2 breasts has to lose some kind of rating here.
Creeping up from under manhole covers. 1 gangrenous leg. Cinch-around monster growling. 1 Nuclear Regulatory Commission cover-up. 1 really bad clogged drain. Heads roll. Flamethrower foo. 1 great performance. John Goodman as cop in diner. That's his role in this movie. I'm going to say 2 stars.
2 stars. Ladies and gentlemen, Chud, 2 stars from Joe Bob. I think one of the lowest ratings we've seen here so far on our drive-in watch-along.
WTF, man. Joe Bob gave it 2 stars. So, Darcy, get ready. Get ready. We're going to hear from people tonight. I want to see those letters. I want to see those emails, those tweets. But I am going to defend my judgment. And it has nothing to do with the shower scene. But you know what I'm talking about, right? You've done shower scenes, haven't you, Darcy? Okay, don't even answer me. What people don't understand when they say, that was gratuitous, Joe Bob, is that there are good shower scenes and there are bad shower scenes, just like everything else. A lot of it depends on what shower head you're working with. Some movies have a Speakman 48 speed. You can crank that thing up to Hoover Dam level. Some movies have one of those shower heads at the Best Western that just kind of spit on you at random angle. But the actress needs to be in touch with her shower head, or it's just wasted H2O. You know what I mean? Are you in touch with your shower head, Darcy? Okay, don't answer.
First segment break, 24 minutes, 53 seconds into the movie.
Okay, let's talk about how this movie happened. Downtown New York theater people were having a party. 2 of those people were John Hurd, who plays the photographer, and Daniel Stern, who plays the soup kitchen reverend. They had a friend named Shepard Abbott who was at the party, and Abbott said something to the effect of, who knows what scary stuff lives under us in all the tunnels and sewer lines and gas lines and subterranean alcoves that have been carved out of Manhattan's underground. And from that, they started talking about a story, and there was a movie producer there. He'd only produced 1 film, The Bell Jar, the uplifting flick about suicidal poet Sylvia Plath's nervous breakdown. So he was an art house film guy, and all the people at the party, for that matter, including John Hurd and Daniel Stern, were art house film people. John Hurd had starred in Cutter's Way, Between the Lines, if anybody remembers those early films, in what came to be known as the independent film movement. And Daniel Stern had starred in Breaking Away, and almost everybody involved was what I call Shakespeare in the Park people. You know, they weren't really from the exploitation movie world, so when they decided to make a horror movie, they were talking about it like, we're going slumming. So let me give you an obvious example, just from the scenes we just watched. The homeless woman who leads the photographer down into the tunnels near the Chambers Street subway station, that was Norman Mailer's wife. And if you look at her resume, she had been a model on early 1950s TV shows like Beat the Clock, but mostly she was a New York theater actress who appeared on and off Broadway in productions directed by Peter Ustinov and Clifford Odets, and directed by George S. Kaufman. She was in a Romulus Linney play. She was in the Elia Kazan movie, A Face in the Crowd. She worked at the Provincetown Repertory Theater, so you get the idea. So Shep Abbott comes up with the word chud at this party. That's all he comes up with. And John Hurd and Daniel Stern encourage him to write a movie around the word chud. And since he's not a writer, all he can come up with is an extremely rough draft, which they hand off to Andrew Beneam, the producer. And he wants to make the movie, but it's not really a full screenplay. And so he gives it to Parnell Hall. He's an actor and a writer of mystery novels who has also never written a screenplay. And so somehow, based on that, Boneem raises $1,250,000.
Jesus.
So once he has the money, Hurd and Stern say they will work for scale and a percentage of the profits, but they want their friends to all be hired. So Boneem has to hire Douglas Cheek to direct. To this day, it's the only thing Douglas Cheek has ever directed. He's an editor. And they insisted that Christopher Curry be hired to play the cop. And that woman who was killed in the first scene with her little fluffy dog, that was Daniel Stern's wife. And John Hurd's sister is the female cop. So bottom line, you're going to hire all our friends, and we're going to make a horror movie before we go back to doing real movies. And so Chud happened. Now, you guys know, I like almost anything as long as it's not boring. But what I do not like is horror movies where the makers of the movie seem to be superior to the material or superior to the audience. These were not lovers of the genre. This movie has much in common plot-wise with another New York monster movie made around the same time, Larry Cohen's Q the Winged Serpent. In fact, it has a couple of scenes that are so similar, I think Parnell Hall might have been influenced by it, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. But watch the movies side by side and you'll see what I mean. This one is kind of by the numbers. Q the Winged Serpent is a truly inspired story by somebody who loves his characters. All right, well, we're going to talk about it more, but right now, let's get back to the flick. The bag lady, she gets arrested for attempting to steal a cop's gun. Who writes that? The motivated incidents in the script are kind of goofy. And yet, the actor who plays Val, the scary homeless guy in the soup kitchen, Gog and Magog, what is he talking about? They have the power to shut the sky. I think he's quoting the book of Revelation or something. Anyway, that's Graham Beckel. He had been in the paper chase. He'd grown up in Greenwich Village. All the people in this movie were products of either New York theater or indie films of the 70s or both. I'm surprised Jeff Goldblum is not in the movie.
Greenwich Village got a lot of rich people too, so Greenwich, Connecticut, not surprising at all how a lot of the people who made this movie actually were able to raise $1 million in the 80s to make this kind of a movie. But again, as I said before, when I watched it back then, and I mean, I was only very young when I seen these movies, but again, I didn't really consider them cannibal movies. And I guess now how Joe Bob has mentioned it and talked about it, you can see a lot of the flaws in the movie and just the writing and the directing style as well. As he said, a lot of the people who made the first Chud, at least, were not really the most horror quintessential people to ever grace horror itself. But when I watched it back then, I just remember it being a very goofy kind of horror movie. Like I said, though, some of my favorites are like the more campy movie stuff, but I never really considered it like the cannibal film back then.
He was in all those indie films. Jeff must have been in Martha's Vineyard or something.
And again, just to be able to raise $1 million for this kind of movie in the 80s that absolutely blows my mind. I mean, that is almost unheard of in the 80s for fucking horror movies. So, you know, again, a lot of the New York theater people, a lot of people from Greenwich, Connecticut, there's a lot of rich people down there. They fucking had the money to make this, so they had an idea and they made it happen.
They're making a movie about angst-ridden Ivy League vegetarians. So, oh yeah, the other scary homeless guy, the one in the tunnel with the giant wound on his leg, that's Bill Raymond. He plays Ebenezer Scrooge every year in A Christmas Carol at Hartford Stage. Hartford Stage is one of those prestigious East Coast snob theaters. So Shakespeare in the Park, people. You understand? They're stopping off to do this little horror movie on their way to Shakespeare in the Park. You see what I'm saying? And by the way, who thought it was a good idea to have Shakespeare in the park in the first place? Hey, Willie, I got an idea. Let's take some of the most intricate poetry ever written in the English language and have some student actors dress up like Elizabethans and scream it through the night while everybody brings a picnic basket and listens to it through a beer haze. Who would possibly buy that idea? I hate Shakespeare in the Park. You know, hey, Al Pacino is doing Shakespeare in Central Park this year. Yeah, well, good. You go have a good time with your mosquito spray and your plastic champagne glasses and your guys in leotards running up and down the ramps, because I'll be at the bar.
Joe Bob, ladies and gentlemen, not a fan of Shakespeare in the Park. We're here for the horror genre. We're here for the true slasher movies, the horror shit that gets us going.
What kind of yellow-eyed, snaggletooth monster goes for the mutton and ignores the veal? The creature eats Grandpa and leaves the girl alone? I know you can't really show a little girl getting eaten by a Soho sewer monster in the movie, but they don't really show any actual monster chomping anyway. For a movie named Chud, we see remarkably few actual chuds. You know what I mean? Where's the chud? Daniel Stern kind of takes over this movie because the other actors are so sleepy. That scene between John Hurt and Kim Greist where they discuss whether to have an abortion or not and then decide to have the baby and then they presumably have sex, it has no real purpose in the movie other than to show how much in love they are, I guess. Only if you had a Geiger counter to measure the chemistry between those two, you wouldn't get a reading. It'd be 0.0000 on the eroticism scale. John Hurt is probably best known today as the father in the Home Alone movies. But in 1984, when this movie came out, he was a major up-and-coming star. He'd gotten rave reviews in a series of indie films, Chilly Scenes of Winter, Between the Lines, that movie about the underground newspaper in Boston.
I just want to add to, ladies and gentlemen, Home Alone, also one of my favorite Christmas movies. My favorite Christmas movie is How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the version with Jim Carrey, the live-action version. That I have to watch like every Christmas or it doesn't feel like Christmas. But I do love the Home Alone movies as well. Specifically Home Alone 1 and 2. Home Alone 2 shot exclusively in New York City. So shout out to New York for filming Home Alone 2.
Jack Kerouac in Heartbeat, and his breakthrough was when he played the wounded Vietnam veteran in Cutter's Way opposite Jeff Bridges. He played the son in A Trip to Bountiful opposite Geraldine Page right after this movie came out. And it's kind of a mystery why he never became a star. He'd grown up in Washington, D.C. His father worked for the Pentagon in the office of the SecDef. That's what they call it, the Secretary of Defense office. And then he was all over New York for years doing theater. Right before this movie, he had third billing in Cat People, that Nastasha Kinski movie. And so you would think he was on the fast track to a kind of Dennis Quaid stardom, you know, because he had that non-threatening sexuality. In this movie, it's so non-threatening, he just kind of sinks into the upholstery on his couch. So anyway, we here at the Last Drive-In remember him in later years as the corrupt detective on The Sopranos. And then, of course, George in Sharknado. he worked with Daniel Stern a lot.
The man went from working on The Sopranos to working on Sharknado. What a fucking fall from grace.
They were in the Home Alone movies together. They were in the Milagro Beanfield War, the Robert Redford movie. See, you can't stay in that independent film world for 10 years and keep making atmospheric indie films. You end up being disqualified from the cast of Terminator. You know what I mean? I think that's what happened. Everyone went, oh yeah, John Hurt, indie guy. Passed away in 2017, and I'm sure he was quite happy with all his Obie Awards. Obie being the Oscars of off-Broadway theater. Kim Greist, on the other hand, who plays his significant other, she was a Connecticut girl from Stamford, and this is her first movie, and in my opinion, she's more committed to her role than John Hurt is to his. She was a professional model. She'd also done some off-Broadway theater, and she would have a brief period in the mid-'80s where she was used in a lot of big-budget films. She was the blonde fantasy girl in Brazil for Terry Gilliam, Manhunter for Michael Mann, Throw Mama from the Train. But her last substantial work on the screen was as a recurring character on Chicago Hope in the mid-90s. Okay, so the compelling script of Parnell Hall has the bereaved cop who doesn't tell anybody at the police station that his wife is missing and doesn't seem that bereaved about his wife being missing anyway, and the soup kitchen reverend descending into the bowels of the subway system to find a Geiger counter and a prosthetic leg. Ooh, back to the film. You know, the only three places they mention that gives us an idea of where the Chuds live, they mentioned Lafayette Street, Houston Street, and Chambers Street, which would mean all this stuff is going on in Soho, which would mean in 1984 it's going on where the painters and the sculptors are squatting in the old industrial buildings, which they call lofts, coining the word loft, which is used today to describe hipster real estate all over America. So if the Chuds come up to ground level and chew off the faces of some humans, the victim is probably one of those conceptual artists who dress all in black and stay up all night flinging paint onto a chrome bumper or building a totem pole out of French newspapers or something. That guy in the phone booth, he probably had a contract with the Belgian government to do avant-garde plays in abandoned churches where all the actors wear hockey masks and leotards. So I think they need more sympathetic victims. You know what I mean?
Joe Bob is trying to tell you the people who made this movie are too rich, ladies and gentlemen. They had too much fucking money in their pockets to make this shit happen. And that is why Chud is the result that it is, okay? There are too many people out there with fucking money to make this shit happen sometimes. I mean, you even see it today in Hollywood all the time with a lot of the bullshit that they produce and put out. Specifically, in my opinion, with a lot of the paranormal activity stuff when it comes to all these movies about fucking haunted houses and ghosts. But that's besides the point. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, the people who made this movie had a lot of money in their bank account. So, hey, the only thing that they know how to write about is people with money. And who are going to be the victims? They're going to be fucking artists. They're going to be people with money. Next segment break, 52 minutes into the movie, almost towards the end here now.
This is what I call a whole lot of plot getting in the way of the story. We got the police commissioner, the police chief, who is different from the police commissioner. Wouldn't we need just one or the other? Do we really need both?
I mean, you think about it, you know, in a lot of the old school mafia movies, you know, kind of happening around like Little Italy in New York, completely different from Soho in New York City, where it's a lot more of the fancy kind of exclusive people who do live in New York. But again, there's a story of struggle and then there's a story of riches. And Chud didn't have the proper writers or directors. They just had money in their bank account. So they decided to put those kind of people in this kind of a movie.
The big meeting around the world's biggest conference table. We got the Nuclear Regulatory Commission guy, which is weird because the only thing the NRC would be involved with is those used fuel rods.
You know, it almost reminds me too of like whenever people ask me how do I feel about Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast here on YouTube is one of the worst fucking YouTubers I've ever watched. I don't watch any of his content. I don't believe that a person who makes money off of their YouTube videos is actually creative. I think, you know, if I was to give anybody $1 million, it would be pretty fucking far-fetched for them to not come up with something creative, right? There's a problem if I give you $1 million and you can't even come up with fucking one good idea. So that is kind of why I dislike Mr. Beast a lot. I don't watch any of his YouTube content. I don't support any of his businesses or things like that. I will say this. There is a difference to me between somebody like a Mr. Beast and a Rob Dyrdek. Okay, Rob Dyrdek, a professional skateboarder at one point. He owns about like half of the fucking MTV network at this point. I mean, he's had so many shows from Robin Big, Fantasy Factory, I believe also Ridiculousness. But, you know, you take the story of a skateboarder who's just trying to hang on to his career, who doesn't really have a lot of money to provide for himself. He's kind of living on dead end. And then he becomes, you know, an owner, a very important business person to the MTV network. You know, it's the story of rags to riches to me. Somebody like Mr. Beast, like I said, who just makes millions of money off of a fucking YouTube video, to me is stupid as fuck. The difference to me between a Mr. Beast and a Rob Dyrdek, Mr. Beast is an entertainer and Rob Dyrdek is an entrepreneur. Okay, there's a very big difference, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully one day you guys will learn the difference.
They bury it Yucca Mountain or wherever. And didn't they say earlier it was the EPA, not the NRC, that was involved with the Geiger counter and the hazmat suits and all that stuff? And does the NRC show up for a meeting with a soup kitchen dude and a precinct detective on an hour's notice? And once they accidentally discover a huge document that has Chud written on the outside of it, and they force the NRC guy to tell them part of what's going on by threatening him with the newspapers. Whoop.
One thing I also want to mention, now that I just thought about it, I do remember hearing at one point that Dr. Disrespect, at one time, Dr. Disrespect did work for Sledgehammer Games, who is also a partial creator for the Call of Duty games. Honestly, I hate Sledgehammer Games. I hate fucking Raven and Sledgehammer combined. Advanced Warfare was the Call of Duty that retired me. So it makes a lot of sense that I not only hate Advanced Warfare, but I also absolutely hate one of their employees, Dr. Disrespect, who probably made that fucking game or had some kind of input on it. But yeah, the worst developers for Call of Duty to me are Sledgehammer and Raven. I don't care what people say about Infinity Ward or Treyarch, because they at least actually have some creative fucking ideas and they actually did something for the Call of Duty games. Infinity Ward created Call of Duty and then Treyarch basically just branched off of that. But Sledgehammer and Raven are absolutely in my fucking cesspool of dislike.
Ooh. Why does he then send a guy to swallow a quarter so Shepard can't make a phone call while simultaneously sending guys in Saturday morning cartoon action figures Starship Troopers boots down into the sewers to clean them up or take pictures or something?
So fuck you. Fuck you, Dr. Disrespect. Fuck you, Sledgehammer Games. And fuck you too, Mr. Beast. You fucking rich sons of bitches.
One thing I can tell you for damn sure, we're not seeing any chuds. There's a notable lack of chud chomping in this part of the movie.
Where's the chud chomping and chud?
Get on my nerves. He's chewing the scenery like crazy. His character, the soup kitchen preacher, he wasn't originally even in the movie. They stuck that in so he would have something to do. If you look at Daniel Stern's resume in the early 80s, he's doing Stardust Memories for Woody Allen. He's doing Off-Broadway. He's doing Honky Tonk Freeway for John Schlesinger. He's doing Diner for Barry Levinson. He's doing Hannah and Her Sisters for Woody Allen, Born in East LA, and Chud. What's wrong with this picture? Another guy from DC. He's actually from Bethesda, Maryland. But where did he learn to act? The Washington Shakespeare Festival. So you see what I mean about the cast? That's George Martin as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission guy. Actor and director at the Trinity Repertory Company Theater in Providence, Rhode Island. That was pretty much his full-time gig, although he occasionally turned up in classy movies like Dead Poets Society, Awakenings, Quiz Show, probably most famous for being the husband of Katherine Hellman. All right, back to the movie. The NRC would not be in charge of toxic waste. The EPA would be in charge of toxic waste. But I guess they decided evil EPA administrator was not as scary as evil nuclear regulatory guy, because the word nuclear, especially in the early 80s, meant dirty, corrupt, dangerous, basically a shortcut for screenwriters to say greedy corporate jerk. But if you're a fan of this movie, and I know there are many of you out there, aren't you a little pissed off, just a little, that they don't show the chuds? Don't you think they're being chud chintzy? Look, they had $1.25 million to work with. Not exactly exorcist money, okay? Enough to build chuds, all right? Based on the promises on the poster, there is a chud deficit. You know, the word chud, it sounds kind of nasty, doesn't it? Like maybe you don't want to know what that means. You know, it can even be an insult. You chud. You're nothing but a lousy chud, you know? Hence, the movie made a lot of money because all you chuds went to it.
Now, one thing I do want to add, ladies and gentlemen, just on a side note, I do have a little bit of family living in Maryland and Washington, D.C. More of my father's side. My mother's side is just all here in Buffalo, New York. But I've never visited them. I remember one time my dad wanted to take me down to Washington, D.C. in Maryland, more specifically Washington, D.C., just to be able to see all the monuments and whatnot. And I couldn't go because I had to do summer school because I was a fucking letdown and a disappointment all my life. But I remember him being really pissed off at me at that because he wanted to take me, but I couldn't go, so he had to basically just go by himself to visit his family. And I don't even communicate with his side of the family anymore. That's all for personal reasons, for my own thing that I'm not going to talk about during the stream, because it all has to do with like how I was, how I grew up and basically what happened after his death. But yeah, we do have family members. I do have family members, at least in Maryland and Washington, D.C. on my father's side. But again, I have never visited them. I have never been to Maryland or Washington, D.C. I basically have only known Buffalo, New York for all 26, almost 27 years of my existence now. I've never even been to New York City, which I would like to do someday. The one thing that I will say, though, that I do appreciate about Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, as mentioned here from Joe Bob more specifically, since we are talking about developers, since I just came off of that topic with Call of Duty and how much I hate Sledgehammer Games, how much I hate Dr. Disrespect, how he was an employee for Sledgehammer Games, so it kind of makes sense that I dislike Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare fucking retired me. Last Call of Duty I ever enjoyed was Call of Duty Ghost, which was made by Infinity Ward. Bethesda, Maryland is also home to the great developers Bethesda, who are responsible for one of my favorite game series of all time, if not my absolute favorite, Fallout, okay? Fallout has been one of my favorite video game franchises for many years now, and it is great that Bethesda actually has something going for them. Fallout 76 got a lot of hate at first, but it seems like after the Prime series on Amazon came out that people kind of shifted towards it and gave it a little bit of a second chance there, which I'm happy about. But shout out to the good developers in Bethesda, Maryland, over at Bethesda, for making all the Fallout games that we know and love. Next segment break, an hour and 3 minutes now.
One of my favorite moments in this movie is when the police commissioner says, "You can't do that, you'll blow up the whole city." And Wilson says, "I'm not going to blow up the whole city, just a small section of Soho." You know, it's funny, but it also reveals the basic problem with this story. You know, when screenwriters talk about writing on the nose, it means when the character says and does exactly what he tells you he's going to say and do. There's no mystery. There's no subtext. Everybody in this story is exactly what he or she appears to be.
And since we just got done talking about Washington, D.C. and Maryland as well, it pretty much makes sense why I'm so much of a Pittsburgh fan when it comes to Pittsburgh sports as well. I love the Steelers. I love the Penguins. Okay, so fuck you, Washington Capitals. Pittsburgh Penguins all the way. All right?
Normally, if you were going to...
And the Steelers are pretty much rivals. Their main rivals, I would consider at least like the Bengals and probably the Raiders. But again, you know, I like Las Vegas. I do like Las Vegas, but there was, you know, once upon a time where the Steelers and the Raiders absolutely hated each other. I always liked the Steelers, honestly, because when they did make it to a Super Bowl, they would beat the living hell out of the Dallas Cowboys. And if any of you know me, you know I absolutely fucking hate the Dallas Cowboys. Any team from Dallas is considered to be my rival. And then one more thing. I also think the Buffalo Bills should have at least beat the Washington Redskins in a Super Bowl. I mean, I can understand losing to the New York Giants. Okay, I can even understand losing to the bitch-ass Dallas Cowboys at that time because they had a fucking dynasty. But we could have at least beat the Washington Redskins. And that's also another interesting, ladies and gentlemen. That's also another interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen. Ghosts and goblins. Witches and wizards. Vampires and werewolves. You can't call them Redskins anymore because that's considered racial, right? You can't call them Redskins. But apparently, when you call somebody light-skinned, or how the word light-skinned, and people make fun of light skins all the time in hip-hop music and whatnot, that's apparently okay. You can do that. But when you talk about Redskins, you got to switch that shit to the Washington Commanders.
Fix a problem like that, you would just flood the zone with flesh-eating monsters, but they don't do even that. We finally got a tiny little glimpse of the monsters with their gas-masky, glowing yellow eyes. Apparently, homeless people turned into vicious wolf-like mutants after being exposed to radioactive waste products, because, that happens. But that's followed by the cat and mouse portion of the second act, trapped underground by the evil government official. Who will survive? How will they get out? Tunnels, hallways, passages, blah, blah, blah. I hate cat and mouse. I hate it. Very hard to do well, and judging by the storytelling skill set of this director so far, I have a theory about why people like this movie, though. People like any movie where New York City turns out to be even nastier than we thought it was. This is 1984, when New York had only recently emerged from bankruptcy, crumbling infrastructure, skyrocketing crime rate, drug lords turning entire neighborhoods into war zones, graffiti on every wall and every subway car. People loved that stuff. And now we find out there are mutated New Yorkers living underground and popping up through the manholes and eating people. Yes, it was a super punk version of New York City that made people believe that no matter how bad it got in New York, it could get worse. It was this depraved mythological wasteland. Any movie about New York, but especially a horror movie, was sort of post-Holocaust by definition, if that makes any sense. Okay, here's my other problem with Chud. Whose story is it? John Hurd and his cute pregnant girlfriend trying to be relevant? I hope not, because they're both just dull as butter knives. Is it Daniel Stern as the tireless, self-righteous spokesman for the homeless? I hope not, because that's kind of a lame idea that's not even worked out in the story. Is it a police procedural? It's probably a police movie, but they use Christopher Curry as Captain Bosch, and he's not even that upset when his wife disappears. Everybody is kind of sleepwalking through the movie. This was only Christopher Curry's second movie. He had played a hippie in The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper, and he would go on to do many, many supporting roles, including the one I remember him for. He was the father of Johnny Rico in Starship Troopers, but never very memorable as an actor. Smug. That would be my word for the acting in this movie. Everybody except Daniel Stern is phoning it in on their way to Meisner class or something, because they have to get ready for the Ionesco play that they're in this weekend. All right, back to the movie. Do you do Meisner class or Strasberg class? You always did one or the other, right? If you're an actor in New York, Meisner or Strasberg. Or who was that scary lady who had the acting school over at the Public Theater? Stella Adler. She was one of the big teachers. Hated women. You should never appear on the stage, dear. The stage is not for you. Would reduce the women to tears in her class, but loved the young studs in her class. Wonderful work, Derek. But most people were only...
A little bit of sexism from Stella Adler there.
I only do Strasberg. I don't do mine. They would go to HB Studios. Herbert Berghoff was the guy at HB Studios. He had a German accent. And then he died, and his wife took over. Uta Hagen. I study with Uta Hagen, which that sounded so good. Uta Hagen. It sounds like you're asking a Nazi to hold your hand, Listen, since all these actors did go to Meisner or Strasberg or Stella Adler or Uta Hagen, my question would be to these actors, hey guys, they do teach emotional preparation in these classes, don't they? They don't tell you to just show up and spout lines like you're talking to somebody at the grocery store, right? Okay. Yeah, just clearing that up, because after all, New York actors, you guys are serious. You would never just show up and do that, right?
New York City, ladies and gentlemen, serious about their actors, serious about their film. We have a film district even here in Buffalo, New York. Now this next segment break an hour and 15 minutes into the film.
Okay, we've got chuds hanging dog carcasses in basements, clogging drains and pumping blood into plumbing lines, and jumping through the windows of diners and eating John Goodman. Although we don't see John Goodman actually get masticated, we just see that whatever the chud did, it scared a homeless guy. Everybody always says, isn't that cool? John Goodman in Chud. Ha 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 ha. Ignoring the other cop, who is Jay Thomas, who's appeared in about 9,000 TV shows and movies. He was best known maybe as Carla's hockey-playing husband on Cheers, which was kind of a stretch for him because he's from Kermit, Texas. He won 2 Emmys as Jerry Gold on Murphy Brown. He was on Mork and Mindy. He used to do stand-up at the Improv, the original Improv in New York. He worked Caroline's, the Bellagio in Vegas. He was
Now that's also a thing that I want to mention too, ladies and gentlemen. You hear Joe Bob talk about how even Texas actors to play some kind of like a hockey role in a movie or a TV show was just absolutely like out of their element. Why the fuck did the Buffalo Sabres lose an entire Stanley Cup to the Dallas Stars? I couldn't fucking tell you. But it just adds to my hatred for teams from Dallas and why they are my rivals. Dallas, you should not have a fucking hockey team at all. It doesn't make any bit of a sense to me. I've always thought about this, ladies and gentlemen. I've always said, you know what? The Buffalo Bisons aren't really a big team here in Buffalo. I know people love their baseball and they love the Yankees here in Buffalo, New York. The Yankees are such a popular team, maybe even more so popular than the Buffalo Bisons. But I have thought about this. I said if I was Terry Pagula and I had the money, I would take the Buffalo Bandits and I would put them in an outdoors arena. So I would basically move them to the Bison's arena, the Bison Stadium. I believe right now it's called Salem Field because Salem's Hot Dogs is really popular here. It's a Buffalo hot dog company. I love Salem's Hot Dogs, by the way. I eat them absolutely at every barbecue. Anytime I get the chance to get on the grill, I got to do my Salem's Hot Dogs. It basically, Salem's is like the equivalent to Nathan's in New York City. But at once upon a time, it was called Coca-Cola Field as well because we do manufacture Coca-Cola here in Buffalo, New York as well. We also have a Ford plant, all that kind of stuff. I know my mom's boyfriend, he works currently, as an engineer, and he manufactures for different companies like Ford, Chevrolet, different things like that, different car brands. Currently, though, he drives a Volkswagen 2024 Taos. So Taos, however you want to pronounce it. I've always said Taos, Taos. But he makes enough money, to drive a 2024. So, they got to be paying those engineers something to come up with these Ford parts and these Chevrolet parts and whatnot. I've always loved American muscle more over the German muscle because that's just me, right? It goes back to World War II times. I'd rather support Chevrolet way more than a Volkswagen. I'm going to tell you right now. Chevy Corvette, one of my dream cars. Wouldn't mind driving a Porsche, though. A Porsche is nice, when it comes to German manufacturing. But I have had the idea. Okay, if I was Terry Pagula, if I had all the fucking money in the world here in Buffalo, New York, you take the Bisons out. You completely remove baseball from Buffalo, New York, okay? There's no more baseball team in Buffalo. There's no more B-League team, fucking minor league team, developmental team for the Toronto Blue Jays. That shit is gone, okay? So we take the Buffalo Bisons out. We move the Bandits to the Bison Stadium, okay? And then we bring in a basketball team again, okay? Because I think basketball would be way more popular here than the fucking Buffalo Bisons. That's just me. That's just the way I think and what goes on in my head. Again, I'm not Terry Pagula. I don't have the fucking money to make that shit happen. But I tell you what, Terry Pagula, if I did have the fucking money to make that shit happen, there would be no more Buffalo Bisons team. The Buffalo Bandits will be playing in an outdoor arena. I think also what would be the first outdoor arena for a lacrosse team professionally, because the Buffalo Bandits are an NLL team here for the lacrosse league. They've also won many championships over their course of history, so I don't want to see the Buffalo Bandits go anytime. They're most recently coming off back-to-back championships in 2022 and 2023, I believe, so the Buffalo Bandits are still very successful here in the state of New York and the city of Buffalo. So again, remove the Buffalo Bisons. There's no more baseball in Buffalo, New York. We're going to take the Buffalo Bandits. We're going to move them to the Bison Stadium, and that'll be the first ever outdoor lacrosse arena. And then the people who are going to play basically, I always knew it as HSBC Arena, but it's been HSBC, the First Niagara, now the Key Bank. Who knows what fucking bank will own it 10, 15 years from now. But at the Key Bank Center, we're going to have the Sabres and a basketball team. Bring back the Buffalo Braves, damn it. Bring them back. Why not? They make way more fucking money than the Buffalo Bisons ever would.
The morning DJ. In fact, he was the morning guy at WXRK, Howard Stern's station. He has a goddamn star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his radio work. Anyway, Jay Thomas, he was everywhere in the 70s and 80s. He started out as a stand-up comic on Bourbon Street in New Orleans when he was 16 years old. Those were the good old days when child abuse was legal. I started working at 13, actually. But he was an athlete in college. He played for the old World Football League. Fascinating guy. His stage debut was at the Ivoryton Playhouse in Ivoryton, Connecticut, summer stock, where he was the dresser and driver for Tom Poston. Probably his biggest movie was Mr. Holland's Opus opposite Richard Dreyfuss. And that's not all. The waitress in that diner scene is Hallie Foote, daughter of the great Texas playwright Horton Foote, the guy who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird and Tender Mercies. Hallie Foote was a leading lady, supporting actress on Broadway, off Broadway, for just years. She did very highbrow stuff. Once again, reinforcing my theory about this movie. It was just an elaborate acting class for New York theater snobs, a series of scene studies, which is why it doesn't make a lick of sense. All right, back to the film. What would you do if you found the mutilated corpse of your wife dumped by the East River? Of course, you'd go to a dive bar and talk about her with two random cops, right? And why would the Chuds dump her in the East River when they already had her underground? Why didn't they just chomp her into Happy Meals underground? In other words, let's talk about the motivation of the Chuds, okay? What do the Chuds want? They don't want Daniel Stern's wife. I mean, Christopher Curry's wife, but Daniel Stern's wife in real life. They do want Hallie Foote. They apparently want John Goodman and Jay Harris, but maybe they just get hungry at night, and so they go to the all-night diner. And by the way, I miss those all-night diners. I think that was the old Empire Diner on 10th Avenue. I used to go there for dinner every night at 5 a.m. Or would that be breakfast? What do you have at 5 a.m.? Dinner, breakfast? We didn't really care. There's a reason that the Empire Diner was known locally as the Vampire Diner.
We actually still have a lot of diners here in Buffalo, New York. They're actually kind of popular, just to take a family out to and get some nice, homemade meals. You know what I mean? Because that's what diners are. They're just homemade meals. And I know the one popular place that my mom and her boyfriend like to go, since we are talking about, how he's a very successful engineer. I got nothing but respect for the guy. Again, he makes parts for Ford, Chevrolet, all of that. And he's driving a Volkswagen 2024 Taos. But the one place they always like to eat is, I believe, out in Hamburg it's located. It might be a little past Hamburg, because that's kind of where he comes from. But it's called Joe's Family Diner. And I do think that one time I ate there with them, their food was really decent, it was really good. So shout out Joe's Family Diner, but we do have a plethora of diners here in Buffalo, New York. They're still very popular. I don't know if they keep them open past midnight. That might be a little bit more rare, but there's definitely an abundance of diners here in Buffalo, New York. Next segment break, an hour and 20 into the movie. Got to be coming down to the end now.
Okay, so the plan is to close all the subway stations, seal off everything underground, and divert the gas lines into the sewer system because, wait a minute, wouldn't that create a literal, excuse my French here, shitstorm? Because, first of all, how do you divert gas lines to sewer lines? Isn't that an entirely different system? They might not even be close together. All they have in common is that they're lines, and they're both underground. And then even if you did divert gas lines into sewer lines, how does that deal with the Chuds? Parnell Hall, the screenwriter who normally writes paperback detective stories, once worked as a private investigator in New York. But even more impressive, he had an acting role in Hercules in New York, the first Arnold Schwarzenegger film, the one where they dubbed Arnold's voice. Parnell appeared clad in a leopard skin and driving a chariot attacked by a bear, and Arnold has to slug it out with the bear.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Arnold Schwarzenegger did fight a bear. And one thing I just want to add to that, the reason Arnold Schwarzenegger actually agreed to do Hercules, or to do, I believe he was Conan, he actually seen a movie growing up where it was either Hercules or Conan, and that inspired him so much to just become a bodybuilder and become an actor. So it was honestly American film and those kind of American gladiators that inspired Arnold Schwarzenegger even, and inspired him to leave his home country. Okay, it inspired him to leave his home country and then to progress here out into America and pursue his acting career. But I do believe Arnold Schwarzenegger was Conan, and he was inspired by the Hercules movies.
A scene that's essential to the plot, by the way. Arnold moved on to dinner theater. He does those mystery dinner theater shows where you don't know who's an actor and who's an audience member, those things. So Parnell, look, let's just choose one character at random. The character of Victor. Victor appears to be a homeless guy who is now half human, half chud, and he's attempting to kill John Hurd with a gun. Why would you introduce a gun to a monster? I mean, first of all, Norman Mailer's wife was unable to steal a gun earlier in the movie from a cop, but apparently they have a gun now, and either one of them would be willing to kill the photographer if Daniel Stern doesn't intervene. But the implication is that Victor has sort of gone zombie on us. So he's a gun-toting zombie. But we know that these are not zombies exactly because they leave bodies behind and the bodies don't reanimate. Well, they can't reanimate because they eat everything except the heads on the body. So all that's left is heads. But if they did reanimate, they would be the first zombies in film history that could pistol whip you. And by the way, Daniel Stern wants to make Chud into a musical. Whoa. Yes, that's what I said. And just when you didn't think you could be any more confused by the geography of this movie, it's time for the Byzantine conclusion to the greatest sewer movie made prior to Alligator 2: The Mutation, the one and only Chud. Does anybody remember this? In 2011, the Criterion Collection announced a Blu-ray release of Chud with a bunch of DVD extras and a fabulous new print. And then everybody noticed that the news release was dated April 1st. And then a few years later, what happens? Arrow Video really does release a Blu-ray with a bunch of DVD extras and a new print. Because of you Chud monkeys out there. I want to hear from you. What are you thinking? What are you taking when you immerse yourself in Chuddom? It's because of you that we now have Chud 2, Bud the Chud, widely acknowledged as one of the most unwatchable horror flicks ever made. And even as I say that, I know somebody is getting mad at me, and you're going to social media and you're starting a 7,000-word essay on why Bud the Chud is worthy of critical reconsideration. It's no Chud 1, but, because we live in Chud-loving times.
And I do just want to add, ladies and gentlemen, since we are talking a little bit about Arnold Schwarzenegger here, Arnold Schwarzenegger is absolutely one of my favorite actors of all time. I absolutely love his story, and I love his movies as well. But the one thing that I do want to mention, everybody was kind of against Arnold Schwarzenegger when he first started acting and when he first started making movies, or when he even had the idea to just travel to America and try to make something more of his life. I remember him telling the story growing up how his parents were really against the idea of him leaving. They didn't want him to pursue his dreams at all. And again, the reason he pursued his dreams are because he watched American movies like Hercules and Conan, and he got inspired from those physical kind of presence and those action movies. And now today, he's become one of the most famous, most notorious action movie stars of all time. I mean, and not even just action to me, but just one of the greatest actors of all time. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. Um, but I remember him telling stories of how if you grew up where he came from, you either played soccer and you became popular at playing soccer, European football, or you were doing skis, right? You were in the mountain skiing. So, or you would go off to the Olympics and try to win a division in that and try to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And that is pretty much how you became somebody from where he came from. But he had the mentality and he had the idea to just say, you know what, this isn't where I belong. I need something more out of my life. When he was growing up, he would train with the bodybuilders in his country and he would also train with professional wrestlers. So that way he was able to get more of a physical presence. Able to give himself the mentality being around all those bodybuilders and wrestlers to just be able to train physically, to be able to train, countless hours instead of just going to the gym one time. He's going to go to the gym 5 times. You know what I mean? So shout out to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I know he's kind of had some legal issues over the years, but if you guys ever have a chance to watch the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary on Netflix, I highly recommend it. It talks about how he was an athlete to an actor to then a politician, right? To an American politician. So it's a great documentary that covers his whole life. But again, a lot of people were against him when he wanted to go to America and to pursue his dreams. And not only that, but then when he came to America and started, trying to do other things because he had already accomplished so much in the bodybuilding side of it, when he did finally start making movies, he was very hated at the start of his career, right? The directors didn't like him, producers didn't like him. He was known as like a soulless kind of actor because he just didn't have any emotion. He didn't really know how to read the scripts and then portray that emotion to a screen. Um, and then that's why they talk about at the first couple of movies that he did, they had to do voiceovers for him. He didn't even get to have his original voice in the movies because they didn't like the way he talked, they didn't like the way he sounded, and again his characters just seemed very lifeless and no soul to what they were trying to portray in the movie. But I do believe that after he did Conan, it was either Conan or Hercules. I know it was one of those. Um, he finally started to, kind of get a career in films, and then that's where he became obviously the Terminator. Working with even better directors and getting better scripts and being the main, not only just the main character but the main actor in the movie. Um, it was really great to see Arnold Schwarzenegger have a really successful career. I must say that because all the things that were against him over the years is just kind of mind blowing to me. Um, so yeah, shout out to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I do want to say it is because of Arnold Schwarzenegger that I prefer Humvees, the Hummer Jeep, over a regular Jeep here in America. I fucking hate Jeeps. People drive them so constantly. I dislike the Jeep brand. I prefer Hummers, okay? Because Arnold Schwarzenegger prefers Hummers. Arnold Schwarzenegger would drive a fucking tank if he could, and he does. Um, but I prefer more military vehicles over Jeeps. And it's because of Arnold. This is after the end credits now for Chud 1.
Wow. Okay. Yes, Chud has a cast of thousands, and they all run together in those last 10 scenes. any one of which could be the climactic scene. And even with all of that activity, I'm still not sure what happened. Can I start with just one question? Captain Bosch says, "Nice shot," as he's dying. Or is he dying? Does he survive? I couldn't tell. And then we go back to Reverend AJ, Daniel Stern, and then we go back to Captain Bosch, and he says a second time in exactly the same way, "Nice shot." Did they just forget and put 2 takes of the same moment in the scene? And actually, I don't even think it's 2 takes. It's the same take twice. But then again, that diner scene with John Goodman and Jay Harris and Hallie Foote, that thing was moved all over the movie in various edits that they did. It was in the middle of the movie. It was at the end of the movie. It was used as a stinger to promote the sequel. I don't know if it's in the right place or not. Or in an existential level, whether there is a right place for that scene. Darcy, you like this movie, right?
I do indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, Darcy, the lovely male girl here on The Last Drive-In.
It's fun.
That's it. That's it. It's fun.
It's a grimy monster movie with some cool monsters.
With those yellow sunglasses or whatever they were.
Yeah, it's fun. It has an awesome premise, great cast, nice comedy, and some decent suspense.
Did you say suspense? Did you use the word suspense? You're saying, we know from the very beginning.
Okay, I said decent. It's not perfect, but it's fun, and that is the important part.
It's 5 seconds of monsters, 2 hours of smug theater actors.
I mean, you could say that about a million monster movies. I think that's Hammer's motto.
Well, actually, that's true. Those were some smug theater actors at Hammer. Anyway, the big reveal is that CHUD doesn't really stand for cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. I already forgot what it says. It stands for Contamination Hazard Urban Disposal. And Wilson is not really with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He's just a government garbage man who decided to store toxic waste under the streets of Lower Manhattan. And the movie was made for $1.2 million, and it grossed $4.6 million in a very limited theatrical release. And nobody minded that it had a synthesizer score that sounded like a kid pounding on a toy piano. And nobody minded that the 2 main characters had no chemistry. And nobody minded that things like blood spurting out of the shower made no rational sense. And nobody minded that the Chuds had giant psychotronic eyes that didn't go with the rest of their bodies. Or that a toxic waste cover-up plot is one of the laziest cliches in screenwriting. Or that you could take the diner scene and move it around any place in the movie and it didn't affect the plot at all. Or that the guy swallows a quarter for no reason. Or that it's a police procedural with a particularly inept policeman running it, or that there are no real monsters except for about 30 seconds, or that we don't really know whether the Chuds are dead or alive at the end because we never see the Chuds, or that when we do see the Chuds in Lauren's apartment, they look like angry toy frogs because it's fun. Right?
Yes, you are overanalyzing this.
Well, that's what
Darcy says it's a fun movie, ladies and gentlemen.
That they could have done better. Cue the winged serpent.
The male girl likes it. Joe Bob gave it 2 stars.
1,000 times better. But anyway, we can go on all night about that. What you got for me?
This is an email that I would actually really love to know the answer to.
Really?
It's from Adam Competti of Kennedale, Texas.
All right. Oh, God. Okay. Dear Joe Bob, if another Joe Bob Briggs shindig occurs on Shudder, please get the movie you were in on the lineup. I've still not ever seen Hogzilla. What an awesome way to view it for the first time with my favorite horror host who was in it, hosting it. This does come up from time to time. We have people ask for this.
I haven't seen it either, and you should totally show it. It'd be amazing.
You know, I don't think we're going to do that.
Why not?
Because you have no idea what this movie is.
I have no doubt that people would love it.
I have mentioned before, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Bob himself has acted in movies previously. More famously, the movies that he's acted in is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the original. And also, he was working with Martin Scorsese, I believe, for Casino. So he did also get to work with one of my favorite directors of all time, Martin Scorsese. My 2 favorite directors of all time, Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino. But if any of you guys ever want to watch some movies that feature Joe Bob doing some acting, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I also believe Casino.
Hogzilla, it's a giant hog, right? It's a giant pig movie.
I mean,
Right? Hogzilla kills my son. Or it might be my daughter. I can't remember. And I'm the distraught, grieving, vengeance-seeking. Actually, I shouldn't give it away. I shouldn't give the spoiler. I might be a deranged mountain man. Okay.
dude, that sounds so great.
It's not great. The actual
great.
Hogzilla moves about 3 miles an hour on a track. It's not scary. It's worse than Chud. It's Chud without the charm.
I vote we show it.
Not going to happen. Embarrassing. If we're going to show that, we should show Bunny Man 3. Aren't you in a movie called Bunny Man 3?
Maybe.
You're.
I stand by the Bunnyman franchise.
All right. In just a few minutes, our second feature is about a different kind of monster in a different country. A Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton flick that's probably not the one you first think of when you think of Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. And a special guest is going to drop in during that one. But first, I had a good Muslim joke. I wanted to tell a Muslim joke. You know, we have a ban on Muslim jokes. So here's a blonde joke. Blonde wants to go ice fishing. So she reads a bunch of books on the subject. She gathers her gear together and she heads out for her ice fishing expedition. She positions her footstool and she starts making a circular cut in the ice. And suddenly this booming voice comes from the sky. There are no fish under the ice. She's startled by that, and so she moves further down the ice, and she pours herself a thermos of cappuccino, and she starts cutting another hole in the ice. And again, the voice bellows from above, there are no fish under the ice. Now she's worried, so the blonde moves even farther away. She goes clear down the opposite end of the ice as far as she can go. And again, she sets up her stool, and she starts cutting her hole. And one more time, the voice says, there are no fish under the ice. And the blonde stops cutting, and she's shaking, and she looks up and she says, is that you, Lord? And the voice replies, no, this is the manager of the hockey rink.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves. We're about to get ready to watch the episode 2 for season 4, 2019 of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob, where Joe Bob is going to talk about Castle Freak. Now, Castle Freak, I did enjoy the movie. I do think that it's fairly enjoyable, starring Barbara Crampton. But not only that, I personally liked a lot of the cinematography in the movie, considering that it was done such a long time ago. The cinematography is excellent, probably because it's from an Italian director, and that was, more their style back then. But Castle Freak, not a bad movie. So we're going to talk about that next. And again, when it comes to Jeep, I'm not driving a Jeep. You got to give me a Hummer or a Range Rover. I do like the Range Rover as well, ladies and gentlemen. Corvette, my dream car. Okay, Corvette or a Rolls Royce, I'll be happy. My absolute dream cars. But I am not driving no fucking German-made piece of crap, no Japanese-made piece of crap, and get out of here with your Jeeps. I don't know if you guys can see the shirt too good. You know what? We'll break a rule. Since we're breaking a lot of rules tonight here on our last drive-in watch-along, we'll turn on the lights. We'll break a rule for once so the people at YouTube can kind of see what's going on. There's the shirt. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't. Maybe if I back up a little bit more, that's better. It's one of my favorite Jason Voorhees hockey shirts. The Mighty Voorhees. And then here's the hat as well, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of my favorite hats, too, where it's just got like a lot of the airbrush graffiti style. It's Marvin the Martian from Looney Tunes. So I don't know how well you can see it on YouTube, but that is a great hat right there. That is a great hat. You guys can probably see it better here on Twitch. But we turned on the lights for just a little bit, broke a rule. We're going to take about a 1.5, 2 minute break here, and then we will be back with our conclusion of the last drive-in watch along tonight, where Joe Bob is going to talk about Castle Freak. I need to get a new drink because I drank all my half and half Arnold Palmer, my iced tea and my lemonade. We're not sipping on no bitch ass coffee. I'm about to go get a lemonade. I don't like coffee. I'm a hot chocolate kind of guy, but tonight we are sipping on our lemonade for the watch along. So I'll be right back because I did drink all of my half and half Arnold Palmer. So we'll be right back, guys. About a 1.5, 2 minute break. right, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, I have returned. And now we are going to watch episode 2 of The Last Drive-In, season 4, 2019, with Joe Bob. He's going to be talking about Castle Freak. As I said, Castle Freak is honestly a decent movie. For what it's worth, not bad. I do appreciate the cinematography in it. And again, that's probably because it was made by an Italian director. And as I've also said, ladies and gentlemen, the Corvette and the Rolls Royce, my dream car. Would love a Maserati, but that's, we're talking dreams here. Corvette, Rolls Royce, Maserati. I'm going to take a Hummer and a Range Rover over any kind of fucking Jeep. And that's just my stance on it. So with that being said, let us begin with our final episode here on our watch-along.
Okay,
Castle
first of all,
Freak.
before we get started on our second feature of week 1 of The Last Drive-In 2019, the series, we need a bunch of colons for this show, The Last Drive-In, 2019, the series. Colons are great because they make people think there are 37 shows before this they should have watched. Seriously, are you guys excited about this yet? Listen, I got talked into Chud. That was a favor to the high sheriffs. But before we get started, I would just like to say that in the competition between artsy-fartsy New York theater actors trying to make a horror movie and artsy-fartsy Chicago theater actors trying to make a horror movie, Chicago wins every time. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Reanimator, From Beyond, compared to Chud and the Toxic Avenger, I got to go with the Windy City. And of course, the reason for that is Stuart Gordon, who came out of the Organic Theater of Chicago.
Interesting also, how I did mention earlier at the start of this watch-along, how the Buffalo Bills season is going to start this Saturday, August 10th, 1 p.m. The Buffalo Bills are playing the Chicago Bears, in our opening preseason game. And of course now, Joe Bob talking about New York versus Chicago. So it's only fitting, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, somehow I just find a way to make it all work.
And his stock company of actors, which includes Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, and most important for this next movie, Jonathan Fuller. Jonathan is an Alabama boy. And in fact, he's currently the artistic director of that fancy drama school they have in Birmingham. But he has the title role in Castle Freak. He is the one and only Castle Freak in a movie which also stars Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton.
Now, when we also talk about the New York versus Chicago rivalry, it goes, you could talk about how they have a rivalry with hot dogs, how they have a rivalry with pizza. With me, when it comes to food, I'm going to take New York every time, okay? Because we have Italian cuisine here in New York. Not to say that Chicago doesn't either, but I would say it's honestly perfected here in New York a lot more. When it comes to the pizza, ladies and gentlemen, I love me a thin crust, kind of just, cheesy fucking pizza. I don't like the whole, I think in Chicago they call it deep dish pizza, where it's just like all the cheese and shit is underneath the sauce. I hate when pizzas are like covered with so much sauce. It's like it takes up the entire fucking portion of the pizza. So me, I'm taking New York pizza over Chicago pizza anytime. I do appreciate Detroit deep dish style, where it's like more of a square, and then it's got like that crispy crust. I do appreciate Detroit style, but this isn't about Detroit right now, okay, Eminem? I'm sorry. We're talking about the rivalry between New York and Chicago and how it comes down to the food. Both have Italian cuisine. I think it's better here in New York City, also in New York State alone. But I want that thin, crispy, cheesy pizza over a deep dish any day.
And it is a nasty, rough, puke-inducing flick that I happen to love, but this is definitely grown-up horror. There are no cute little one-liners for the weekend middle school crowd in this one. And to give us some perspective on it, we have The one and only Barbara Crampton with us tonight. She's in the house. Barbara is every kind of sultry, sexy woman that's ever been written for the screen. You never know exactly what type of woman she'll inhabit, but she's definitely all woman, which is refreshing in view of what I was talking about before the other movie. You know, the decline of the shower scene, the sex scene, the femme fatale who gets naked. And people say, well, Joe Bob, you're being sexist because the men don't get naked. Well, let's get them naked. I'm all for it. Whip it out. In fact, Jonathan whips it out in this movie, but you don't really want Jonathan to whip it out because sometimes being ashamed of your body can be a good thing, but not usually. People don't even like bikinis anymore. Anybody watch Miss America last fall? ABC went primetime live from Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City for the Miss America. You can't call it a pageant, but the Miss America, you can't say anything about beauty because they got rid of the swimsuit competition. So it's the Miss America. I almost want to call it a talent show like American Idol, but that's not what the organizers were saying it was. So it's the Miss America scholarship competition. You know, that'd be what they'd call it the year before. And supposedly this was the new improved Miss America. So it's the Miss America. Wait. I've almost got it. What do you call young women of all shapes and sizes being interviewed on stage by a panel of judges and they give out world peace answers like Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality? Got to be a name for that, right? Now, if you listen to the New York Times, this was interesting. The new pageant is all about female empowerment and gender equality.
Of course, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said before, we cannot show any type of nudity or sex scenes here on Twitch or YouTube. That will get your ass banned quicker than you can say hey. But apparently, on ABC, Victoria's Secret can prance around a bunch of beautiful women in bikinis and everything is just okay. And this is on national television. You could just turn your fucking TV on and see this shit. We live in an era where now currently any type of, I hate to say it, but any type of teenager growing up in America can just pick up their fucking $1,000 iPhone and access Pornhub and, you know, the fucking, the consequences are very much lower than they were before. But again, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a day and age where teenagers can just pick up their phone, their $1,000 iPhone that their parents got them for Christmas, and just access Pornhub whenever they want. They can see fucking sex scenes of any kind that they want. But again, here on Twitch and YouTube, that type of thing is banned for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you because Twitch sucks, YouTube sucks. But apparently, on ABC, the Victoria's Secret models are okay with running around in bikinis, and you can just access that on TV whenever you want.
Gender equality. I guess that means it was open to men for the first time, right? Which is cool. You know, I want RuPaul to go for it. And, well, RuPaul is probably getting up there in years, so they probably have an age limit. But aspiring RuPauls, you know. And the empowerment part, you know, that indicates they'll have a few rodeo cowgirls and astronauts competing in it. So it's tougher than I thought to come up with this. Let's go to the official announcement. You know, if you read the press conference comments of Gretchen Carlson, chairman of the board of trustees of the Miss America organization, the woman who decreed the elimination of swimsuits because we are not going to judge you on your outward appearance. So maybe in the future, all the contestants are going to be hidden behind Chinese folding screens or something, so the judges won't be influenced by their faces or their bodies. But I'm still looking for clarification on the name. So in the comments of the other Miss America officials, I'm finding a lot of references to, quote, goals and aspirations, like low-impact TED Talks. They're apparently talking about your goals and aspirations is the replacement for bust size, ripped abs, and the ability to walk gracefully in heels. So let's make a list, all right? Numero uno, no swimsuits, therefore no body judging. Numero two, all about the inside of the person instead of the outside, meaning we need to start telling all the contestants, I respect you for your mind, which their Facebook friends and their wannabe boyfriends, they're already doing that. Numero 3, they want these women to talk a lot about their future lives and their dreams and why they love America and the philosophical aspects of blah, blah, blah. So Miss Michigan, she chose to talk about the Flint water crisis. So that's a good one. Pick an underperforming utility company. That's good. So pretty much the opposite of a beauty pageant. So, I got it. It's the Miss America fake job interview competition. That's what it is. Whichever woman is able to pull off a 5-minute bullshit session, especially if she wants to work with disabled children in El Salvador, can be Miss America, even if she weighs 250 pounds, which is great because, Miss America, that's a 1921 tourist promotion that more or less invented the idea of girls in swimsuits acting cute for the camera, and it has now been turned into high school mock United Nations, but with evening gowns, so only in America. Something tells me that other countries will not be following our lead on this, For example, I seriously doubt they'll be eliminating the swimsuits when the 32 Miss Mexico contestants assemble in Hermosillo this year, because Mexicans love bikinis and they know how to throw a party. So when those women talk about their future lives and dreams, they sometimes do it while still wearing that bikini. The current Miss Mexico, Vanessa Ponce de Leon, she has a degree in international commerce and she has a diploma in human rights and she works with children from indigenous tribes, just the kind of stuff Gretchen Carlson is looking for. But her main credit, winner of Mexico's Next Top Model. So she's not giving up that bikini. But I can tell you who's really pissed off about this. It's not what the New York Times calls the leering, what do they call it? The New York Times says, the leering television audience of the past. Really leering? The whole audience? They're all leering? Even my grandmother who never missed a Miss America pageant for decades? Grandma, stop your leering. So, no, the people that are pissed off are the contestants in all the state pageants. They're trying to make it to Atlantic City, and they have spent years in the gym sculpting their bodies before Gretchen Carlson changed all the rules, trying on $500 bikinis that weigh less than 0.002 ounces. So all women who have been doing 17,000 sit-ups a day, plus an hour on those innie-outie machines, I don't know what the real names of those things are, but women use those things to work their thighs, plus all the usual rope press downs and reclining leg lifts and light dumbbells that tone the muscles, plus a daily diet that consists of 3 kale leaves, a handful of chia seeds, and a balanced protein bar. So these women were lean, mean, ready to work that high-heeled bikini walk. And so I guarantee you that on the day Gretchen Carlson announced the rules changes, at least half of them screamed, "You stupid bitch! I just spent $1,000 on Pilates." So how do I know this? Because millions of women who are not competing for Miss America are doing the same thing just to feel good about their health and their fitness and their appearance. So here's my question. Isn't America the most fitness-oriented country in the world? Aren't we the country that invented aerobics and circuit training and the Gold's Gym standard for body athletes and the Planet Fitness standard for average Joes taking care of their bodies and jazzercise and personal training and health insurance discounts for gym memberships, the spandex bodysuit, the muscle tee selfie,
I do just want to add to this, ladies and gentlemen. It fucking grinds in my gears every single time when I see WWE refuse to promote any fast food or any type of Burger King, McDonald's, anything like that. I remember once upon a time, the Olympics was real hand in hand with McDonald's, but for WWE, they would, showcase Subway back in the day. This is before the whole Jared thing, but Subway was a big sponsor for them. And now, for WWE athletes, you are actually more rewarded for your discipline over, trying to self-indulge. So basically, I find it funny how they'll never show fast food chains or any type of Burger King or McDonald's or anything like that, but they'll fucking promote an alcohol. They'll fucking promote Wheatley vodka, and you can basically kill yourself from alcohol poisoning, but you can't get fat when you're in the WWE, okay? That is a big-ass no-no.
We did not invent the bikini.
Go ahead and drink fucking 12 shots of Wheatley fucking vodka. I don't even like Wheatley vodka. I'm more of a Kraken guy myself. Kraken rum. It's the pirate in my blood, ladies and gentlemen. But you can fucking drink 12 shots of Wheatley vodka and end up with alcohol poisoning. That's okay to the WWE. But if you eat a fucking cheeseburger, you're going to get your ass rejected quicker than fucking Matt Riddle trying to win a WWE championship.
Honor goes to France, but we definitely immortalized the bikini and perfected it and extended it to the male swimwear, often in micro bikini form. So there's a reason that every American fitness center has mirrors on every wall. There's a reason that Arnold Schwarzenegger had to make his way to Southern California instead of trying to run his bodybuilding career from Graz, Austria. And that reason is that we're all...
And it ties into Arnold Schwarzenegger again, ladies and gentlemen. We're on the fucking ball tonight. We are pinpoint accuracy tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Arnold Schwarzenegger had to leave Austria just to make his way. I believe originally he made his way down to Florida, because when you watch his documentary on Netflix, he does talk about how he had to come over to Miami at first, and that is kind of where he got his start over here in America. But of course, he moved to California somewhere down the line and, became an amazing star out there. Well deserved, as I've said, Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of my favorite actors of all time. But in Austria, what he was doing was very much frowned down upon. It wasn't considered the right thing to do. His parents were very much against him for wanting to pursue his dreams. And he basically said, Austria isn't for me. If I'm going to be anything in my life, I need to leave Austria and I need to go over to America. That's what he did. And now I'm pretty sure almost any of you know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is now that we're talking about him.
Trying to get our bodies into better shape. So what would be wrong? This is a hypothetical question at this point. What would be wrong with honoring American women who reach perfection or near perfection in this area? What would be wrong with following the Greek ideal of a healthy mind inside a healthy body? We probably don't want to go as far as the Greeks did, because the gymnasium was a place where you worked out totally naked. I don't know how you do that, but we know from Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, they believed in a healthy society, cultivated both a disciplined mind and a beautiful, fit body. So those Greek perverts, just look at their sculpture. And they had to do all that toning the old-fashioned way. They didn't have any elliptical cross trainers or Nautilus plate-loaded weight stacks. So what objection these body-shaming Puritans have to the swimsuit competition?
Another addition to the Greece topic, since we're talking about Greece here with Joe Bob. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, professional wrestling dates all the way back to Romans and the Spartans and the Greece, when they would use pro wrestling and wrestling just in general for combat training. So pro wrestling has a very long history. It, again, goes all the way back to Romans and Spartans and Greece using it for combat training. So we are talking a lot about things tonight that is a little bit all over the place, but somehow it all ties together here on these last drive-in watch-alongs with Joe Bob, does it not?
Is that it's weird for women to be parading around. I'm quoting the New York Times again. The New York Times increasingly seems to be written by grumpy spinster aunts. Those girls are parading around. So they're parading around in bikinis while wearing high heels. Now, I happen to agree with that particular complaint, because wearing high heels in a body competition is a way to cheat on the calf work. So I doubt if this would convince any swimsuit model to give up heels anytime she has a chance to wear them, because they just make the legs look better. But to deal with the parading around part, that's what a pageant is. It's a parade. It's a look at me event. Not anymore, of course. And just one more quote from the Times before we leave them drowning in their own self-righteousness. They say, officials at the Miss Universe organization did not respond to multiple messages seeking comment on Tuesday about whether they should also end the swimsuit competition. Because apparently the Times reporters believe that once the swimsuit is torched in America, the French maillot de bain, the German baranzug, the Japanese mizugi, the Spanish traje de baño, and the Russian kupalnik cannot be far behind. I half expect them to send an investigative team out to Coney Island this summer, start calling out women in tankinis for spending too much time working on their glutes or whatever. But I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm sure ABC was very happy with the bikini-less Miss America show, despite that 39% drop in ratings from the year before, because, you know, they had all that female empowerment and they had all that gender equality. They achieved that. And besides, all those 39% were the leering grandmothers, and we needed to get rid of those people. But right now, we're going to watch Castle Freak, the old familiar story of an alcoholic father and the pill-popping wife who hates him, and the teenage daughter who got blinded that time Dad rolled the car and killed his 5-year-old son. And so this Swiss family tragedy inherits a 13th century Italian castle from an old lady who used to beat her son with a cat of nine tails until he was a big mass of fleshy sores and keep him chained up in the dungeon where he nurtures erotic fantasies despite a maimed, floppy wangdoodle. Sure, we've seen that story before, but have we seen it with cannibalistic hooker sex? I think not. We have 8 dead bodies, 7 breasts,
7 breasts,
skinned, 1 extended chase scene, 1 motor vehicle crash, random skull paintings, abandoned toy room, dangling clown doll, chain strangling, forehead wall bashing, crypt destruction, casket cracking, eye chewing, spine stabbing, whip wielding, wine bottle bashing, hooker shackling, chambermaid bludgeoning, ear ripping, chain jerking, butcher knife to the forearm, sexual assault by claw, thumb rolls, breast rolls, eye rolls, mirror foo, rooftop foo, parapet foo, face slap foo, manacle foo, double baton foo. Driving Academy Award nominations for Elizabeth Kaza as the obligatory creepy housekeeper, Jonathan Fuller as the toothy, bug-eyed, bony-limbed castle freak with erectile dysfunction who likes to bite off body parts, including his own. Raffaella Offidani as the town hooker with a halter top and a secret. Jeffrey Combs as the guilt-ridden, bourbon-loving dad who has sex with...
Raffaella Offidani. I believe this is the only movie that she's actually noted for doing and popular for doing. She's the hooker in Castle Freak. But Raffaella Offidani is so fucking sexy, honestly. I don't understand how she didn't get more roles after this movie. But I definitely thought she was fucking beautiful in this movie.
His pants on. Barbara Crampton as the mom with an attitude. Jessica Dollarhide as the blind freak bait daughter. And Stuart Gordon, the director, for once again painting the walls red. 4 stars.
4 stars.
Joe Bob says, check it out.
Joe Bob recommends it. 4-star rating here for Castle Freak.
Gretchen Carlson, who put the ban on the bikinis, she was Miss America herself in like 1989, which means she embraced the bikini. She benefited from the bikini. She rocked that bikini. You know, she got a network anchor job, in part, at least, due to the bikini. So she's kind of walking all over somebody else's Stairmaster. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That reminds me of like when people say they hate Infinity Ward games, but they love Treyarch games. Dude, Infinity Ward fucking created Call of Duty. Treyarch branched off of Infinity Ward, and now Black Ops 6 is basically taking the idea from Modern Warfare. It's going to be the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the Gulf War. That's fucking Modern Warfare, you idiots, okay? Black Ops to me was always more about the Vietnam War and the Cold War. That's what the fuck Black Ops is. But, again, for the people who dislike Infinity Ward so much, but can respect Treyarch so much, that's what that reminds me of. The person who put the ban on the Miss America bikinis was once the creator of the bikini for Miss America. You just sometimes don't make any fucking sense. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I dislike Sledgehammer Games and Raven the most when it comes to Call of Duty. Absolutely fucking hate Sledgehammer. And I even hated them more once I found out that Dr. Disrespect was an employee for Sledgehammer. So that is, you know, that definitely adds to my hatred for them. But fucking Advanced Warfare absolutely retired me from my competitive Call of Duty scene. Ladies and gentlemen.
Loves the bikini? You know who Siobhan Cunningham is? Mr. America. Siobhan has a good time showing off his body. He could care less about world peace, you know? And I don't think he's even Greek. Siobhan's bikini is so tight it looks like skin on it. I mean, it actually looks like he lost his skin and it's some form of wound care on his body. That bikini is so tight he could have sex without taking it off. If you know what I mean. And I think you do.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do love Castle Freak. As I've said before, during this stream even, we did try to do a full-length movie watch-along where we did try to watch Castle Freak for our 4th of July movie marathon. Unfortunately, YouTube did not allow that. That is actually where I picked up, I believe, my second strike, maybe my second or my first. But we tried to do a whole movie watch-along for the 4th of July this year in 2024. Couldn't do it, so this is more of a edited version of that watch-along, where Joe Bob is just going to discuss his review. And I do think that Castle Freak is a decent movie if anybody ever gets to check it out. I can appreciate it for its cinematography. Again, shot in an Italian castle by an Italian director who owned the castle. Now, the one thing I do dislike about the movie when I did watch it is the police officers are so fucking clueless in this movie that it's unbelievable. I mean, how do you get hired to do a stakeout and like you're sleeping on the job, you're not aware of your surroundings? I mean, aren't police officers supposed to pass all this shit in training? Like, it seems a little fucking outdated, to be honest, but for the time being, I mean, the cinematography is really top notch, and it's not that bad of a story either.
You know, this may be a crazy comparison, but this movie opens along the same plot lines as 13 Ghosts, that lame William Castle movie from 1960. Family inherits a castle. The creepy housekeeper warns them to get out while they still can. Only in the original movie, the creepy housekeeper was Margaret Hamilton, better known as the Wicked Witch of the West.
Now, I know I bash on paranormal movies and ghost movies a lot because that's basically the only thing that Hollywood can come up with. Fucking new Conjuring movies, new Insidious movies, and whatnot. But I do love 13 Ghosts. Not only the original, but I do like the remake a little bit more because it has Matthew Lillard and also Shannon Elizabeth, my bae Shannon Elizabeth, shout out Shannon, and Matthew Lillard for that. But I do appreciate the remake a little bit more over the original when it comes to 13 Ghosts. And 13 Ghosts is kind of where I draw the line at where I appreciate like the ghost movies, because I remember watching that back around like 2000, like the start of the millennium. We're fucking 24 years later, and they're still trying to make fucking movies about ghosts like I'm supposed to be entertained by this shit. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, the fucking ghost movies are all the same shit, okay? A family moves into a house, the house is haunted, and now they gotta get rid of the ghost, or they gotta move out of the house, whatever the fucking case may be. How the fuck can you make 5-6 movies off of a fucking haunted house?
Whereas in this movie, it's the Hungarian actress Elizabeth Kaza, who made very few English language films. She mostly worked in Paris during her lengthy career. But anyway, I love the setup because here's your 13th century castle. It's all yours, followed by what's the catch, followed by we gotta get out of here. Plus, we got this whole tragic dead baby subplot haunting the dreams of the great Jeffrey Combs as John Riley. And we got the whatever it is lurking in the dungeon ready to feed. Now, I don't know how much time passed between the Duchess passing away, and that was a fine little mini performance by Helen Sterling as the Duchess. She's an English actress who appeared in many Italian films. But I don't know how much time passed between the Duchess passing away and Jeffrey Combs and his family arriving to take over. But during that time, the freak apparently had no food at all. Now, even if you lived right by JFK Airport and you dropped everything in your life and you flew the fam to Italy the next day, I got to think you're looking at a week by the time you hit Rome and you make your way to the little town, which is Giove.
Now, this is one interesting fact about the movie Castle Freak, ladies and gentlemen. All of the actors, anybody who worked on the movie, did get to live in the castle. So not only did they film in the castle, they lived in the castle day by day. They would wake up, they would eat breakfast, dinner, whatever, and then fucking do their filming, do their routine basically while living in the castle. So that is something that you don't see done a lot in horror movies today, especially just movies in general. A lot of the actors dedicated themselves to this movie by doing that, I believe. And it's just an interesting fact, like I said, because the director did own the castle, so it was his property. So a lot of the people who worked on this movie did just live in the castle for that time being while making Castle Freak. just a little interesting fact. Since we're talking about Italy and all the best things that Italy has to offer, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said, one of my dream cars, a Maserati. Just wanted to put that out there. Shout out to Maserati.
By the way, tiny little commune town about an hour north of Rome. Why did they film there? Because that castle is owned by Charles Band, the owner of Full Moon Entertainment, which distributed the film. So my point is, by the time you get picked up by the lawyer and you make your way to Giove, and that thing in the basement is hungry. Plus, she was only feeding him whatever the cat didn't eat in the first place. This movie actually started with nothing but a poster. Charles Band showed Stuart Gordon the poster.
An idea from a poster.
Stuart Gordon said, okay, what's the movie about? And Charles Band said, well, there's a castle and there's a freak. You can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you have a castle and a freak. And so Stuart Gordon went and found a short story by H.P. Lovecraft called The Outsider. It's about a man who has never had human contact with any other person. He spent his whole life imprisoned in a castle where he's never seen the light of day. And then when he finally escapes, he terrifies everybody around him, and then he terrifies himself because he sees himself in a mirror. So that story is actually told from the point of view of the creature. But to open up the story, they switched the point of view to Jeffrey Combs and that whole backstory of his life, which makes him ultimately responsible for the creature. So very imaginative the way Stuart Gordon used that story in order for Charles Band to once again use his own castle to film a movie. They used the same building for From Beyond and The Pit and the Pendulum. And since the castle is so big, the actors and crew would live there as well as work there, and they would eat most of their meals in the big castle kitchen until they got sick of that and they'd go into town to restaurants. But anyway, this movie doesn't get the same respect that Stuart Gordon's previous collaborations with Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton got, Reanimator and From Beyond. And I think it's because they decided to do this one straight. No comedy, no irony. This is in-your-face, nasty horror. All right, back to the film.
In-your-face, nasty horror.
It's in your ugly monster face horror, you know. You know what makes the special effects work on...
That's the kind of horror we love here on this channel, though.
The lips on that monster. And the drool. You know, anything associated with the mouth of a creature like this will always make it harder to look at on screen. I'm sure they teach that at the Tom Savini School of Gross Out in Pittsburgh, whatever that thing is. You know that place where you can go learn how to run machetes through your friends or whatever? I'm sure they have a class where they say, always have lots of liquid coming out of the messed up snaggletooth maw of the creature. Get that maximum ick factor. Does Tom still have that school? You know, he used to have Savini University or whatever. Just think, people have $100,000 in student loans so they can learn how to saw an ear off a dwarf in slow motion. Not that it's not worth it.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get Barbara Crampton here in just a few minutes to discuss her perspective on filming Castle Freak.
So the Castle Freak goes coyote on us there.
And Barbara Crampton is great as an actor. I do love her a lot. I also respect how she's also been involved with the horror genre throughout almost her entire career. That's something that always stands out to me. You don't see a lot of actors nowadays almost being entirely involved with horror, but Barbara Crampton really made a name for herself in the horror genre. So in just a few minutes, she's going to be a guest here on The Last Drive-In, and she's going to discuss her perspective from filming Castle Freak here.
Rips the thumb off so he can get free of those manacles, and it's probably because... Are we supposed to think it's because he set eyes on the blind girl and now he's got a reason to live? Well, you know what? We've got an expert here. We might as well ask her. Barbara Crampton, ladies and gentlemen, Susan in Castle Freak, her third collaboration with Jeffrey Combs and Stuart Gordon and the rest of the Full Moon dudes. So, Barbara, can you confirm for us that this is a disgustingly oversexed monster?
Oh, my God. Yes, absolutely.
And you guys actually lived together in that castle, right?
We did. Yeah, the castle, as you said, was owned by Charlie Band, and it was in Giove, halfway between Rome and Florence. And he bought that castle as a second home for himself and decided, hey, since I'm a movie producer, I should make some movies here. And that was our hotel as well.
I would say this particular role is a departure for you because it's very much a mom role, and
Yeah.
you were not doing mom roles at this point. I mean, you didn't do that very often, right?
No, I was sort of the femme fatale, I suppose, you know?
Yeah, many people cite Reanimator
Hmm.
as your first film role, but you were in the vastly underrated Fraternity Vacation,
Oh, yeah.
shot in 1985.
Right.
Did you like being in Fraternity Vacation? Was that a fun thing?
Of course. Well, look, at the time, I was just happy to be in any role, you know, as an actor just looking for work. But I worked with Tim Robbins on that film and Matt McCoy and with the great James Frawley.
There was a whole bunch of those that and you can't
Like
make
teen
those.
sex comedies,
It's a dead genre. It doesn't exist anymore.
They don't do it
But
anymore.
the four guys on
The teen sex comedy is not really as popular today in America. I guess you could say like the most recent one that we've really had that was popular was like American Pie. But you don't see a lot of teen sex comedy movies anymore. That was like more for my generation growing up and stuff. But the one thing I do want to add is, like I said, I love when actors have their recurring roles in horror, especially that genre. It's one of the reasons why I love American Horror Story, because every season is going to be like a different story, but they're going to take the same actors and put them as different characters. I really love seeing actors return and just do things like that because it makes me feel like they're really passionate about the genre. And it's great to see them do other stuff in horror, like if they ever get the opportunity to do like a Friday the 13th or a Halloween, anything like that. But American Horror Story is great because every season is going to basically take the same actors from the previous year, put them as different characters in a completely new story, and that's why I love American Horror so much. American Horror Story so much as well too.
vacation trying to get laid and they never get laid. That was basically the plot. A lot of actresses started in those movies, wouldn't
Sure.
you say?
It was a rite of passage for all of us to do those films.
And then you did the two greatest Lovecraft movies ever made.
Thank you.
Yeah, Reanimator and From Beyond. And what's interesting to me is you kind of switched with Jeffrey Combs.
Right.
You were the supporting in Reanimator, and then he was the supporting in From Beyond.
Yeah, and he was the mad scientist in the first one, and then the second one I was sort of the mad scientist.
And I actually like From Beyond better than Reanimator.
You've told me that before. Thank you.
I'm in a minority on that.
I think so.
But I do. And then you made Chopping Mall. You were in Chopping Mall, the sort of infamous Jim Wynorski film, Chopping Mall.
Where no one gets chopped, they get lasered, but the title's good.
Puppet Master, Robot Wars, and all that time you were also working in soap operas.
I was.
Then you do Castle Freak, and then you disappeared. What happened?
I don't know what happened, really. But I think I was about 35 years old when I did that film, and there weren't a lot of roles 25 years ago for 35-year-old women.
35 is the cutoff point?
It was back then. But, you know, I've come back, and now you were talking about gender equality. There's a little more gender equality in the film industry now, and we're working towards that a little bit more, and people are aware of that. And I feel like there's a lot more roles available to women of my age now.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot just in the past 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So you've always got great chemistry with Jeffrey Combs.
I love him.
And you still have great chemistry, and even when you hate him in this movie, you still have great chemistry with him.
Yeah, I think it was a nice dynamic for us because really in the other films we were adversaries, but in this film there was a deep sense of love that we had for one another. And I think that does come through even in the scenes where we're fighting.
So you say there's deep love below the hate that you're expressing for all of his bad decisions in life?
You know, he has a lot of guilt, and I blame him for my son's death. And that's a lot to get over.
So you think it's like two strong people trying to hang in there?
We were trying our best, yeah.
All right, well, stick around because I want to get your take on some stuff in the movie. But right now we're going back to Castle Freak. The freak does have a penis, right? Because, you know, we were discussing this before the show. It's a penis. It's just floppy. Or did his mother hack it off? Because they're always so vague about penis mutilation. You know, the same thing happens in Sleepaway Camp. It's a monster penis because his whole motivation is to get a girlfriend, right?
I think it's to have human contact. I don't know if it's to get a girlfriend.
Well, not that you would need a penis to
Have connection. Yeah.
because you can go transgender. And what I wondered is whether his mother had done some involuntary dick surgery on him or something, because that would explain the moodiness of the Castle Freak guy. And actually, when you go female to male transsexual, male to female transsexual, that's easy. You just hack it off. But when you go female to male, you got to build that thing out of soft vaginal tissue, and then you got to put studs in there so it'll pop up and cause mischief. And they've got all kinds of, electrical wiring and hydraulic pumps and hydro geek equipment. And the female to male transsexual, if you build it, they can just party like a porn star. But
they will come.
Yeah, exactly. They have an app on the iPhone for it or something. I'm not sure. But the Castle Freak, he could have used an intervention like that. And but I'm glad that you're new here, but you're already going to places that most people wouldn't go.
I'm happy to be here in any capacity with you, Joe Bob.
All right. Well, we'll party then.
All right.
Now, I do want to say, ladies and gentlemen, the freak in Castle Freak is a little bit perverted. If you guys ever do get the chance to watch Castle Freak, just go in that knowing that.
So the Castle Freak is basically a voyeur at this point in the movie. He wants the girl, but he doesn't touch the girl. He thinks he's probably normal until he sees himself in the mirror. And by the way, how about that Jeffrey Combs explanation for the totally shattered mirror? The wood was old. That's his explanation, right? And now the freak is watching Jeffrey have a tender moment about his dead son, the one who looks exactly like the dead son in the crypt. And the freak is getting all kinds of conflicting signals here, because Jeffrey is his brother, the blind girl is his sister, but also he wants to have sex with her. And Barbara, I don't even know how he feels about you.
I'm in the way. I think he'd probably like to have me gone so that he could get to Jessica's character. Don't you think?
Monster, because
Now, the one thing that's also interesting, if you do get the chance to watch Castle Freak, they even bring it up in the script. Jeffrey's character, once the monster does break the mirror, he has the police basically search the entire house. But when the police come looking for the missing hooker, he doesn't want them fucking searching the house at all. So that's kind of like a conflict there in the script. They do mention it and they do bring it up. But it's just funny to me how, like, a mirror can break. You want the police searching your house, but when they come looking for a missing hooker, it's no. You got to have a warrant for that.
some of those scenes you have are in very close quarters with the monster.
Thankfully, he moved slow, so that was good. And
did he get drool on you?
No.
There's a lot of drool coming out of
Yes,
the monster.
he was hard to look at. But Jonathan really embodied that character very well. He was very physical with the character, and he had a lot of vocal sort of signals because he couldn't really speak.
It's really amazing what he does. I mean, usually when you put on that much makeup, there's very little you can do.
It's hard to act when you have that much makeup on.
But he really comes through the makeup in that role. All you guys that work for Stuart Gordon in these movies are kind of what we used to call in high school drama mamas.
What does that mean?
Theater geeks, people who are always in the drama department.
Yeah.
I think that's good because that's what makes these ensembles work so well in all of the Stuart Gordon movies. And you did study the craft.
I started in theater. Yeah, that's what I thought I wanted to do initially.
And at Castleton State College.
Yeah, near my hometown.
You may be the only movie star that ever came out of Castleton State College.
Maybe, yeah.
Because you're from Vermont.
I'm from Vermont, yeah. And I went to school at a small community college. And the nice thing about that was it was a small department. So I pretty much got every starring role. And
then you did the New York thing for a while?
I moved to New York and I worked at the American Theater of Actors. I played Cordelia in King Lear.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was working on Madison Avenue as a waitress, making a whole lot of money and not a lot of money in my craft. So I thought I should probably move to Los Angeles because I think they pay more money if you work in the movies or television.
The big news now is that you are producing the remake of this movie.
Castle Freak, that's right, yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you that it was written by a woman. We have a final draft of the script. It's very good, but it's a whole new set of circumstances as far as who's involved. The people and the players in the film will be completely different.
So the original story is sort of half based on a Lovecraft story.
The Outsider, yeah.
And half based on what Stuart Gordon spun out of the Lovecraft story.
Yeah, he's famous for inventing things.
Yeah, and so this is based on those two sources and then additional sources.
You'll see that it has more Lovecraft elements to it.
Well, as far as what's going on right now, I really think you should be nicer to Jeffrey in this movie and at least sleep in the same bed with him. Otherwise, he's likely to go into town and get a hooker.
I guarantee it.
If I had to say this movie needs something right now at this juncture, I would say a hooker. Definitely a hooker would make this movie better. So thanks, Barb. We'll talk some more at the next break. Does anybody call you Barb? I just called you Barb.
My husband does, yeah.
Really? As the mom, but though, you should really be nurturing the freak in this movie. You should be the one who understands the pain of the freak. And instead, you pretty much inflict his pain. You kick some ass here with the freak. And that's probably, from your upbringing in Vermont. You Vermont girls are vicious, I've heard about that. It's not all Ben and Jerry's and Bernie Sanders up there. You got some kung fu mamas up there in Vermont, right?
Kung Fu Mama Cougars living in Vermont, ladies and gentlemen. Next segment break, 56:50 into Castle Freak, the movie.
Barbara, this is one heavy movie.
It's deep and dark, isn't it?
I think I could have done without the part where Jeffrey Combs ejaculates in his pants or whatever that was, followed by his realization that he's been partying with a hooker in the wine cellar. And by the way, that hooker is played by Raffaella Offidani. Mm-hmm. Did you meet her?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Raffaella, again, ladies and gentlemen, just want to add she is absolutely fucking gorgeous. Don't understand how the hell she didn't do any more movies after this, but this is like the only movie that she's actually noted and cited for doing, which is Castle Freak, but she is a fucking beautiful actress.
She didn't speak English very well, though, so we sort of nodded to one another.
This was the last movie that she ever made.
No wonder.
Yeah, really?
After this, what can you do?
What can you do after Castle Freak?
2 episodes of an Italian miniseries, but apparently freaking all over Jeffrey Combs right before the freak freaks all over her in a movie called Castle Freak was all her resume could handle, so she retired from both the small screen and the big screen. And but Jeffrey's performance here,
I guess after
he never gives the same performance.
I guess after Castle Freak, she decided to retire. But again, if there was any major movies out there that wanted her to be in a script or to be, an actress in their movie, then I think she would have actually agreed. But apparently after Castle Freak, what more can you do?
Oh, no.
And
no, he's totally committed to his characters.
And when you work with him, if you do a scene more than once, is he different every time he does it?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think we both are a little bit.
Yeah.
We both try different things.
And how does Stuart feel about that?
Stuart is a pretty sort of heavy-handed director. And if he could play every part in the movie, he would, but he can't. Yeah. So he has an idea.
See, you wouldn't expect that from a theater person from Chicago. You would think he was all about the ensemble and group hugs and everything.
Well, he is about that as well. He does encourage us to try new things and different things because he comes from the theater and that's sort of representative of what people do in the theater. But he's pretty specific about what he wants initially.
So he wants what he wants and do the line like he says to do the line.
Pretty much, yeah.
Castle Freak is not as popular as other Lovecraft films.
No.
And I think because it's dark.
There's not a lot of comedy in it.
I think it's because Jeffrey Combs goes for the darkness, and people, sign up for a Jeffrey Combs movie and they expect
it's a little bit of a spin-off from the Lovecraft kind of stuff.
That movie has been the best of times and the worst of times for him, right? I mean, it's given him life, but also it's given him something that he has to live up to.
Yeah. Well, Jeffrey, we've talked about Jeffrey Combs before. He grew up in Lompoc, California. He studied drama at the University of Washington. And he did a lot of regional theater He worked at the Old Globe in San Diego, the Arizona Theater Company in Tucson, Mark Taper Forum in LA, the South Coast Repertory, all the big regional theaters. So he was highly trained. I always like those guys who do the regional theater, like Lance Henriksen. After he got that training, he soldiered through all the great horror flicks that we know and love, like Reanimator, From Beyond, Bride of Reanimator, Dr. Mordred, The Pit and the Pendulum, Necronomicon, where he actually played H.P. Lovecraft himself. But while he was doing all his regional theater, you were doing 4 soap operas.
Yeah.
You probably have a massive fan base of people who know you mostly from the soaps.
Yeah, it's like 2 different worlds.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was good training for later movie work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I occasionally would have to memorize as much as 40 pages of dialogue a day.
I can't memorize 1 page.
It was difficult, but memory is a muscle like anything else, and so the more you work it, the stronger it gets. And so I felt like after I did my first stint on Days of Our Lives for a year, I was really good at memorizing dialogue, and I felt confident about it. And even if I didn't know it as well as I wanted to, I felt like it would come to me in the moment.
Yeah. Soap opera actors have a language of their own. They, let's say, I hit 17 marks today.
When you're working in a soap opera, or at least back then when I was doing them, the director would tell you where to move on what line, exactly where to turn. It's 3 cameras, and you had to hit those marks specifically and exactly at the right moments, because they were cutting and editing as they went along.
Now, one thing I do want to mention, ladies and gentlemen, when you see something like TV series nowadays doing a lot more of like the horror stuff, even like we mentioned earlier today with the Fallout series on Amazon Prime, anything when it's like Batman, horror, a lot of the TV shows, they will have different directors for every episode. And one thing that is actually kind of known is that in TV shows, it's not really the director who has the most important part. Because usually when it comes down to the TV show, that's why they're so interchangeable, and that's why they change like every single episode. If you watch one of your favorite shows, just go back, and even in American Horror Story, like I said, with stuff I've seen like Gotham, Twisted Metal, Fallout, they will always have like a different director sometimes, because the director doesn't really have the most important role on set for TV shows. All of that stuff is kind of handled by the production team. The director is just kind of there to add his influence and to just say, okay, this is a good idea, this is not a good idea, whatever. But really, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff gets done with the production team. And, it's a lot different than making a movie, because I think when you make a movie, it's the actual director's vision. It's the director trying to put his vision into a movie. That's why, again, you will have so many things like remakes nowadays, or just different versions of like Batman movies, where it's like you got Tim Burton's version of Batman, and then Christopher Nolan's version is going to be completely different, and then so on and so forth. Directors in movies are far more critical because they have the vision, right? They know what story they want to tell, and they need to tell that story through screenplay, through the script, through their actors. When it comes down to a TV show, it's a lot more with the production team handling things, and the director is kind of just playing a side role where he says, okay, I like this or I don't like this.
Have a specialized skill, because you're listening, you're concentrating on the words that you've memorized, plus the actor that you're working with, plus where you have to move.
You have to move, and trying to make it be authentic and real.
And what happens if you screw up and you don't move at the right moment?
You're fired. No, that's not true. No, they'd let you do it again, but you didn't want to screw up too much. It was a busy day.
Okay. I really appreciate you being with us. This has been great.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be with you. And congratulations on your resurgence.
Resurgence, that's like back from the dead, right? So
You've been reanimated.
All right. Back to the flick, but the thing that makes this so heavy this movie.
Yeah.
When your wife tells you that you should have died.
I know, that was harsh.
She wishes you had died, and that you kind of tell him that you're doing God's work by trying to make him die, you know, and that he's solely responsible for the death of a 5-year-old and the blinding of your daughter. I think there's no such thing as overacting. I think Jeffrey can go as far as he wants to go with that. You know what I mean?
He can, and he does. You know, Jeffrey is a big actor, and he fills up the space he inhabits. And so acting with him, I felt like I had to sort of, you know, try to measure up to that energy level that he was at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he has plenty of motivation for being suicidal, because maybe,
poor guy,
you know, destroying his own life and the life of his whole family.
Yeah.
You know, most directors would say, you need to dial that back a little bit, Jeffrey.
Stewart wouldn't say that to Jeffrey. No.
He would say, go big with it.
No, more is not enough. Is Stewart's moniker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see how big he goes in this
Right.
in this next sequence.
Next segment break, an hour and 7 minutes.
Okay, you guys know me, and normally I try to avoid getting down into locker room talk, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to go there right now because Stuart Gordon has shown us the mind of the freak. And apparently, somehow, somewhere, during the feral education of the freak has heard the phrase, eat pussy. And so we are given the scene of Jonathan Fuller as the deformed monster Giorgio, who we now know is the half-brother of the Jeffrey Combs character, chowing down on the vagina of Silvana in an all-too literal fetishistic interpretation of the locker room phrase, eat pussy. He is indeed devouring her pussy like a rotisserie chicken. So no wonder that actress retired from acting at the age of 34. And remember, in Reanimator, also directed by Stuart Gordon, there's a scene where a head gives head. So Stuart kind of has a thing for vagina-related visual metonymy, to use the literary terminology for depicting on film what a normal person would kind of assume is metaphor and would anyway leave to the imagination. Did y'all follow that? I'm sure you did not follow that, but that's as much as I'm going to say about it. All right. Jonathan Fuller as the freak. Jonathan, as I mentioned earlier, is from Birmingham, Alabama, went to the Alabama School of Fine Arts, moved up to Chicago to go to the Goodman School of Drama. Worked all over town, including the Organic Theater in Chicago, where he met Stuart Gordon during a production of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And Jonathan Fuller played the title role in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, usually when you talk about the monster guy in a movie like this, you just say, well, he had to be in the makeup chair for 6 hours every morning. And that's pretty much it. But Jonathan Fuller had to be in the makeup chair for 6 hours and gave a performance that comes through that makeup. This guy is pathetic, terrifying, brutal, lonely. It's a three-dimensional monster. So kudos to Jonathan. He doesn't really get enough credit for this. You know what Jonathan is? He's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. He's the real thing, unlike those lame half monsters in Chud. So anyway, to show you what a versatile guy Jonathan Fuller is, he was also the first actor to play Jesus in The Glory of Easter, which at one time was the largest passion play in the Western Hemisphere. They staged it once a year at Robert Schuller's Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. Also a pretty bloody story requiring lots of special effects makeup. So Jonathan played a deformed, cannibal, deranged, feral, prostitute, devouring, drooling psycho, and he played Jesus Christ. That's some range. Not to mention Huckleberry Finn, so the man can raft the Mississippi, bludgeon multiple Italian character actors, and suffer on the cross. Who has that resume? Jonathan Fuller has that resume. So we honor you tonight, Jonathan, but the next time somebody uses metaphorical language for sexual activity, just ignore that, okay? Back to the movie. See, he's trying to copy Jeffrey Combs in the movie. So do the same things with the prostitute that Jeffrey did. But he didn't go to 8th grade sex education class, so he doesn't know what you call the body parts. Somebody's bound to get hurt in that situation. If he heard some barroom talk like, So this girl and me, we were making the beast with two backs. He'd probably bring a camel to bed.
Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the freak in Castle Freak is a little perverted. If you ever decide to watch the movie, just know that going in.
You know, you get a lot of service out of an Italian lawyer. He drives you to the castle, he handles the estate, he defends you against all criminal charges, he finds out inside information from his sister, who's your housekeeper, and he strangles you when he finds his sister dead. The first time I saw this, I didn't understand that Massimo Sarchielli, the actor who plays the sleazy lawyer, was related to the housekeeper. So you have to pay attention to the details in this one. Anyway, Massimo is a veteran character actor in Italy. He was in the occasional American film shot in Italy, like Lady Hawk, Under the Tuscan Sun, because his English is just good enough. Why don't they subtitle the Italian in this movie? You know, there's 2 or 3 scenes where the cops or the other characters break into Italian, but they don't bother to subtitle it. And I think it's because we're supposed to be watching from Jeffrey Combs' point of view. And since he can't understand what they're saying either, you know, they leave it that way. One thing the Italians did not like about Stuart Gordon is that he required him to have a sound man on the set. Because usually the Italians don't bother to record live sound. They just dub everything, including movies that are 100% Italian with 100% Italian actors. They still go into the studio and dub the words later. As far as I know, that's the only country that does this, because some people just have to be different, don't they? Okay, it's now time for the frantic conclusion to Castle Freak. And the blind girl, we should mention, is played by Jessica Dollarhide as Rebecca. She had just graduated from John Burroughs High School in Burbank. And she would go on to Woodbury University, but this is her last acting role. She gave it up after being pawed by the freak. She quit the business. Woodbury University, the finest institution of higher learning in Burbank. You don't think of people going to college in Burbank. You think
a few actors definitely retired after this movie, which is also an interesting fact.
Not going to school, but Jessica Dollarhide went to high school and college in Burbank. She turned down that offer to leave town and go to like Van Nuys to college. You know, and she kept it local. And I don't mean to make fun of Woodbury University. Do they play football? They play football at Woodbury University. They probably play water volleyball, some California sport, skateboard racing. So go team, go Woodchucks. Probably the Woodbury Woodchucks.
A lot of retirements after Castle Freak, ladies and gentlemen. This is after the end credits, so we are at the end of our episode now.
And so Jeffrey Combs redeems himself by an act of murder-suicide, freeing not only his family, but the entire village of Jove, Italy, from the curse of the snaggletooth, drooling, naked, floppy, wangdoodle, cockeyed glopola monster who has a very good excuse for wielding the whip. He was imprisoned and tortured for 40 years by his mother. You know how they say the serial killers always have mommy issues? Multiply that times 9,000 in this movie. An important safety tip: if you're fleeing from a horny, naked, lizard-skinned skeleton carcass of an arrested development geekazoid with mangled lips, go for the chifferobe. He's never going to look in mom's chifferobe because he doesn't know what clothes are. Okay, great movie. Great movie. Great fight scene there at the end. Club versus whip. Yet another great screenplay by Dennis Paoli. That guy doesn't get enough credit. He wrote Reanimator, he wrote From Beyond, Pit and the Pendulum, Dagon, The Black Cat. He wrote that Lovecraft story for Masters of Horror. He also worked at the Organic Theater in Chicago with Stuart Gordon. We always call these Stuart Gordon movies, but they're just as indebted to Dennis Paoli. In fact, this one especially is a masterpiece of cobbling together 3 things. One, the Lovecraft story, which was a first-person account written by the monster, getting out of a dungeon after 40 years, what that's like. But that's not enough for a movie. So 2, he creates the story of the family marred by tragedy that inherits the castle where the freak lives. And 3, he writes it so the whole thing can be filmed inside the vacation home of Full Moon Entertainment president Charlie Band. That's his castle. Paoli has written a lot of screenplays for Charles Band. He wrote Ghoulies 2. He collaborated with Larry Cohen on Body Snatchers, the Abel Ferrara movie. He wrote The Dentist for Brian Usna. Teaches at Hunter College on the Upper East Side of New York City, in case you want to take a class in writing for the cinema grotesque. Also, let's give credit to Jonathan Fuller as the monster. He really delivers a performance inside that heavy makeup, sometimes stuff you can hardly watch, like when he suckles at the breast of the hooker and then bites it off, or when he caresses the blind girl with his hand. And let's give credit to John Vulich, creator of the special effects makeup for the monster. He did those bleeding gums and the bubbly saliva and the long nails and the mangled stuff of a penis flopping around. What? In fact, what do you, Darcy? Come here. What do you say? Oh my God!
Ladies and gentlemen, Darcy, the lovely male girl.
Well, I had a little bit of trouble deciding whether I wanted to be the freak or Sylvana. But I figured Sylvana gets to bang Jeffrey Combs, so
Oh my
winner.
God. You couldn't decide between dressing up like the freak or dressing up like the hooker? Thank you for your decision. Okay. Well, but what do you say? Castle Freak definitely blows Chud out the window, right? Chud blows chunks compared to Castle Freak.
I agree. It's the
Darcy with
weakest
a
of the
great
Coens,
cosplay here of
Crampton,
Raphaela.
Gordon Lovecraft films, but it's still a really good movie with like a really cool monster.
All right. Did the monster have a penis? I'm never sure.
That's the eternal question, man. I think he had a mangled wing.
All right. You know what? What am I thinking? We got to ask Felissa.
That's what I was thinking too.
All right. Here, dial her up. All right. We got her on auto dial,
I
actually.
need help.
There's no sense in having a mangled dick expert on retainer if you don't use it, right?
Hello?
Hi, it's Darcy. I'm here with Joe Bob, and we need your opinion on dicks.
Hey! Oh, yeah, it sounds like you guys must have found a penis.
Not just a penis, Felissa, a mangled floppy. We're watching Castle Freak, and Barbara Crampton was here earlier.
Oh, my God, I love her.
First of all, does the Castle Freak have a dick?
Oh, my God. Most definitely. In fact, his whole life revolves around his dick.
Well, I mean, his whole life revolves around him thinking about sex, but does his dick work?
Any dick works, Joe Bob. You know, I'm actually surprised you don't know that, babe.
Well, it looks kind of dangly, is what we're...
You'd be surprised how fast that dangly one can turn to angry.
So you think the Castle Freak is functional?
With the right victim? Yes, he is.
All right, Felissa, thanks for clearing that up, as usual.
Anytime, you guys, Joe Bob. And make sure you say goodbye to Darcy for me. I love you guys.
Okay, goodbye, Felissa.
Aw.
Bye.
Cheers.
Alyssa Rose, of course, star of Sleepaway Camp.
Well, she loves dicks. All right, I know you wanted to stump Joe Bob. You told me before, but it's got to be fair. Okay, it cannot be a question about somebody's film for a high school class or something like that.
This one's fair. It comes from Lisa Lewis of Brownsburg, Indiana.
Okay. It's not going to be trick. My question is, in what movie did a woman get gang raped, and when the accused gets acquitted, she jumps to her death from the courthouse roof, only to get brought back to life to get bloody revenge on the men who hurt her? Okay, brought back to life how? How did she get brought back to life?
That's all it says.
Gang rape victim brought back to life as a zombie? As a medical experiment?
As a robot.
As a robot? Deadly friend. It's Deadly Friend.
Oh my God, that is a terrible answer. There's no gang rape in Deadly Friend.
Well, it must be something that never got released.
It's Steel and Lace, 1991. Claire Wren is the rape victim, and David Naughton, aka David Naughtyson, is the detective.
I saw Steel and Lace.
Oh my gosh, you forgot it. What does Lisa get?
Lisa gets the satisfaction of stumping Joe Bob.
So you admit it, you were stumped.
No, I'm going to check Google later. I'm not sure I was stumped. All right, this is a blonde joke. It's actually a reverse blonde joke and a lawyer joke. Have I told you this one? The lawyer and the blonde? A blonde and a lawyer are seated next to each other on a flight from LA to New York. You know how long that flight is. That flight is forever, right? So the lawyer is bored, and he decides he'll ask the blonde to play a game with him. But the blonde is tired. She just wants to take a nap, so she politely declines, and she rolls over to the window. She's going to catch a few winks. And the lawyer says, oh, come on, I'll make it more interesting. I'll ask you a question, and if you don't know the answer, you pay me $5. and then you ask me a question, and if I don't know the answer, I pay you $5. But the blonde's not interested. She declines. She wants to get some sleep. And so the lawyer gets incredibly bored on the flight, and he says, okay, look, if you don't know the answer, you pay me $5. And if I don't know the answer, I'll pay you $500. So this catches her attention. And since he's apparently not giving up anyway, so she agrees to play the game with him. So the lawyer asks the first question. He says, what's the distance from the Earth to the moon? And the blonde doesn't say a word. She just reaches into her purse, pulls out a $5 bill, hands it to the lawyer. Okay, says the lawyer, your turn. So the blonde says, what goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down the hill with 4 legs? And as soon as she asks the question, she turns over and goes back to sleep. So the lawyer is puzzled. He tries to figure that out. He takes out his laptop. He searches all his references. He can't find the answer. He taps into the airline Wi-Fi. He searches the web. He searches the Library of Congress database. No answer. He sends out emails to all his friends, all his coworkers. Nobody can come up with the answer. So after about an hour, he wakes up the blonde. He hands her $500. The blonde says, thank you. And she turns back over to get some more sleep. The lawyer's a little miffed, So he wakes her up and he says, well, what's the answer? Blonde doesn't say anything. She reaches into her purse, hands him a $5 bill.
That was a good one, actually.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our watch along tonight. Joe Bob got to talk about Chud, and we also heard him talk about Castle Freak. Next time we will be back with The Last Drive-In Season 4, 2019, Episodes 3 and 4. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and goblins, witches and wizards, vampires and werewolves, for being here with me tonight. I highly appreciate it. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace, God. Your boy is Italian and Irish. So I am going to need that Maserati at one point in time if the Lord up above is listening. Anyways, see you next time, guys.